Emily Blunt and John Krasinski. A love story, written by Barron, Darby. Narration by Jessica Ann Bogart. Prologue. I was 25. I was not yet the woman whose face you might know now from the trailers, or from the press tour for A Quiet Place, or from the Oscar campaign for the film about the physicist and the bomb. I was at a place in my life I would later describe, when I had the distance to laugh about it, as the useful part. I had done The Devil Wears Prada. I had spent a year and a half going to auditions that did not, quite, become the next thing. The breakup of my engagement with a Canadian singer was already in the rear view, though the rear view was not far away. I was in Los Angeles for reasons that, the way Los Angeles always works, were partly about a job and partly about being 25. There was a friend named Gray. Every story has a Gray. Every meet-cute, especially. Mine was a man, an actor, generous, the kind of person who introduces you to other people because he genuinely believes you will like them. And we were at a small dinner at a restaurant the name of which I have, in the years since, mostly let myself forget on purpose. The name does not matter. The room does. The room had 2 tables in my line of sight. At one of them I was sitting, at the other, on the far side of the room, far enough that I had only registered him peripherally, the way you register weather. There was a man in a checked shirt who was clearly enjoying his own dinner companion. His dinner companion was Justin Theroux. I knew who Justin Theroux was, the way an actress in 2008 knew who an actor in the year 2008 was. I did not know who the other man was. I would have placed him in the category of some actor, said the word some the way the English use it, and gone back to my own dinner. But Gray had other ideas. Gray, as I have said, was generous. Gray waved. The man in the checked shirt looked up. There was a beat of recognition between them. Gray and the man. And then the man said something to Justin Theroux that from across the room looked like, "Give me a minute." He stood. He picked his way around 2 chairs and a pillar. He arrived at the edge of our table, and Gray, who had been very pleased with himself, made the introduction, and the man, whose name was John Krasinski, did the thing that I would later understand was the foundational move of his entire personality. He made me laugh. I cannot now, for the life of me, tell you what he said. I have been asked, in interviews, what the first joke was. I do not know. I do not know if it was something about Theroux, or something about Gray, or something about the way the restaurant had run out of one of the things on the menu, or something about how he had walked into this with no plan. I know that I laughed. I know that I have, in the years since, laughed many thousands of times. I know that the sound he was after, on the first try, on that first crossing of that room, was the sound he is still after now. The sound, in a domestic kitchen on a Tuesday morning, of the woman he married deciding she will, for one more day, find him funny. He sat down, or maybe he did not sit. The geometry of the memory has softened. What is sharp is that he had crossed a room, and that he had crossed it without strategy, and that he had spent the conversation paying attention. There is a part of every meet-cute that told later sounds inevitable. Of course he crossed the room. Of course she laughed. Of course they exchanged numbers. The years have a way of polishing the rougher parts off. The bit where he was nervous, the bit where she was distracted, the bit where one of them almost did not go to dinner that night at all, the bit where Theroux waited longer at the other table than he had bargained for. The years smooth those. The version that survives is the one where he walks across the room. I will tell you, because it is the only part that I am completely sure of. I have a different account of this evening than he does. He says it was a different night. He says I had been at his apartment. He says the chronology I am giving you here is wrong in a small but real way. I will not, because I love him, fight him on it in print. I will say only that the historian's responsibility in a love story is to admit when the two parties do not agree. We do not, on this, fully agree. What we agree on is the laugh. What we agree on is that something started. What we agree on, 18 years later, is that whatever crossed the room that night is still, on most days, what is in the kitchen on a Tuesday morning. I would marry him in 2 years. We would buy a house together. We would sell that house. We would have 2 daughters. We would make a film about a family protecting children from a thing in the dark, and on the day I read his script, I would understand. Though he did not, I think, fully understand it himself when he wrote it, that I was reading a love letter to the family we had made. We would be photographed together at premieres and at parking lots, at Walk of Fame ceremonies, and at Brooklyn corner stores, and in a January some years out, we would weather a press cycle that decided, briefly, that our marriage was in trouble. We would weather it by walking out of our apartment building and going to dinner. But all of that is later. All of that is the long part. This is the prologue. This is the first part. A man in a checked shirt crossed a room because a friend named Gray waved, and the woman he crossed the room for is the woman who is, on the morning I am telling you this, downstairs, making coffee. Part 1. Before. Chapter 1. Emily Roehampton. I should tell you about the stutter. If you have read anything about me, the sort of long magazine profiles that get filed under career and origin, you have probably read about the stutter. It is, by now, the part of my biography that has been most often offered up in service of the easy narrative. Stutter to stage is a clean line. It fits in a magazine deck. It explains in one elegant move how an English schoolgirl from Roehampton ended up doing all her best work with her voice. It is also, in the way of all clean lines, slightly too clean. I was born in February of 1983 in a part of southwest London called Roehampton, which is the kind of London neighborhood foreigners do not picture when they picture London. It is leafy, it has trees, it has a pub, the buses run. My father, Oliver Blunt, was a barrister. The British translation for the American reader is that he was a particular sort of courtroom lawyer who wore a wig to work and brought home a satchel of papers tied with pink ribbon. He had the courtroom voice. He had, in his off hours, also the kindest face I have ever seen on a man, and when he watched my younger brother and me play in the garden, he watched us the way a barrister watches the cross-examination, which is to say, he was deeply attentive and quietly amused. My mother, Joanna Mackey, had been an actress before she stopped, and an English teacher after she started again. She was the parent who, on a Saturday in our kitchen, would pull a book down from the shelf and read a paragraph aloud and ask me what I thought it meant. She was a person who, in another life, would have been the person handing out the Booker Prize. In this one, she was the person who had 4 children and a barrister husband and a kitchen with a particular yellow light in the late afternoon. I was the second of the 4. I had Felicity, older, eventually a literary agent, eventually the wife of a man named Stanley Tucci, who you may know better than you know me. I had Sebastian, younger, eventually a film producer. I had Susanna, youngest. I had a household that ran on books and on the soft rule version of British parenting, which is mostly, be interested in things, be kind to people, do not be a snob. I had also, beginning at the age of 7, a stutter. It was not the genteel stutter you sometimes see in films, the kind that gets cleared up by a third-act pep talk. It was the real kind. The kind where a word jammed, and the jam was so long you could feel the eyes of the classroom slide off you, the way they do when something has stopped being funny and started being uncomfortable. It was the kind where my name, Emily, could come out Emily if I was tired or panicked. It was the kind where, in the worst stretches around age 10, I would simply stop speaking at school. Not the principled silence of a child who has decided to make a point. The other kind. The kind where the cost of trying was higher than the cost of saying nothing. I tell you this because it is the part of my own biography that, when I have managed to be honest about it, I have most loved telling. It is the part where someone other than my mother stepped in. The teacher at my school, in one of those small interventions that turn out to be the entire plot, asked if I would try a play. She asked if I would try, in particular, to play a character with a different voice from my own. An accent I would have to put on, a body I would have to move differently inside, a name that was not Emily. She asked whether, with the Emily-ness lifted off me for a moment, I could speak. I could. I will not romanticize what that felt like. It was not a thunderclap. It was a small thing. I said the lines. I noticed I had said them. I sat down. I went home. But I had said them. And the stutter, which lived in the room of being Emily, was not in the room of being someone else. The teacher had handed me a door. It was a small wooden door at the back of a classroom in Roehampton in 1990, but it opened. I did not, at that age, know I was going to be an actress. I did not know the word vocation. I knew only that the part of me that worked with my voice could be borrowed, leased, sublet, walked into. By the time I was 14, the stutter was, in the conventional sense of the word, gone. By the time I was 18, I was on a London stage in November of 2001 in Peter Hall's West End production of The Royal Family, playing the granddaughter of a character played by Judi Dench. Judi Dench, the actress whose voice every English schoolgirl has ever wanted to live inside. I was 19 years old. I had a working voice. I had what felt that year like a door inside a door, but I want to be careful with the easy narrative. The stutter did not make me an actress. The teacher and the play and the school and the gift of being able to say, I am someone else, now made me an actress. The stutter, more accurately, made me a person who knows what it is to want to speak and not be able to. That, I will mention for free, is not a thing you grow out of so much as a thing you carry. It is the part of me that all these years later makes me distrust speeches. It is the part of me that prefers, and this is true on stages and in kitchens both, to let the other person talk. It is the part of me that married a man who walked across a room because he knew, the way the truly attentive know, that the woman at the other table was someone who would be happier if she were the one being heard than the one being looked at. I am not, in this book, going to give you a full childhood. You can read elsewhere about Ibstock Place School. You can read elsewhere about Hurtwood House, the performing arts sixth form in Surrey, where, as a teenager, I learned the thing about being on stage that I did not know I would need, that the work is the work, and the rest of it, the headshot, the agent, the audition cue, is the weather. The work is what you keep. What I'll tell you instead is one specific kitchen scene from that childhood, because the book you are reading is not interested in biography by the meter. It is interested in scenes. There is an afternoon I remember from when I was 8. My mother is at the counter making something with flour. She is not a baker. None of us are bakers. The blunt women have never been bakers. I am still not a baker. My husband is the one who can do the thing with the butter. but on this afternoon she is making something that is, I think, biscuits. Felicity is reading on the bench in the bay window. Sebastian is small, 2 and something, on the floor with a wooden duck. I am at the kitchen table trying to read a Roald Dahl book and discovering that the word in front of me, the word peculiar, is a word I cannot, in the privacy of my own head, get past. I look up. My mother looks at me. She does not ask me to read the word out loud. She does not say try. She is, and this is, I think, the entirety of my early education, paying attention. She has the flowery hand. She sees me. She does not push. She offers with the lifted eyebrow that is for an English mother the equivalent of a sentence. What's it want to be? I do not know how I tell her, because I cannot say the word, but I tell her. By the shape of my face, by the way I am pointing, by the small theater of the 8-year-old's frustration. And she says, with the flowery hand still on the counter, peculiar. And then she says it again, a different way, like she is trying on a wig, peculiar. And then a third time, much smaller, like she is in a play, peculiar. And by the third one I am laughing, because the way she says it the third time is, like everything my mother did, slightly absurd. And the laughing breaks the jam, and the jam comes out as peculiar, and the room continues. There is no morality to that scene. There is no third act epiphany. There is only my mother, my mum, who knew that the kitchen was a place where the stutter could be a small thing rather than a humiliation. She made it that. She did not make my career. She made the kitchen. A lot of what I have done since, and a lot of what I have in the years of being on stages and in trailers and in cars driving away from a press tour, brought back home to my own kitchen, is, I think, just an attempt to be the person at the counter with the flowery hand. I would not meet John for another 17 years, but the room he would eventually walk across, to a table where a friend named Gray was sitting with a woman he had not met yet, was a room that had been built in some long and quiet way by an English mother who said the word peculiar 3 times until her daughter could laugh. Chapter 2. John Newton. There is a thing that happens when you grow up in Newton, Massachusetts, that I cannot, even after almost 3 decades of trying to describe it, fully separate from the experience of being a particular sort of New England Catholic kid. You learn early that you are funny because you have to be funny. There is a brother, possibly multiple brothers, who will not let you be anything else. There is a mother, in our case named Mary Claire, who is a nurse and who has, on any given Wednesday, seen worse things than your minor adolescent humiliation. There is a father, in our case named Ron, an internist, who comes home at 6:30 after a day of patience and who eats dinner with you and listens. You learn early that the conversation at the dinner table is the floor. I was born in Newton in October of 1979. My parents had 3 sons. I was the youngest. I was the one with the easy face. In the small way, the youngest is always the one with the easy face. The older brothers, Paul and Kevin, had done the harder work of teaching our parents how to parent boys, which meant that by the time I came along, the rules had loosened in the specific ways the youngest always inherits. The price of that loosening was that the older brothers were, on a daily basis, ruthless about my newly discovered loosening. I have, somewhere, the memory of being driven somewhere by Paul when I was 9, and Paul saying, with the precise older brother register that is 1 part affection and 3 parts diagnostic certainty, "You are going to be one of those guys who gets by on the face." He was not wrong. The face, in those years, was already the face. The face, by the way, is also why. I will say this clearly so we can move past it. I have spent some serious portion of my adult life trying to be funny in spite of it. People will assume the funny is a bonus on top of the face. The funny is not a bonus. The funny is the response to the face. Anyone who has watched the way I deliver a line on camera has watched me try, mostly to amuse myself, to puncture the face. It is the deal I made with the brothers a long time ago. They told me I would coast. I have, in answer, tried not to. The childhood was good. I'd like to be careful here about the kind of celebrity memoir voice that converts every childhood detail into an explanation for a career. My childhood was the sort of New England Catholic childhood where dinner was at 6:30. The kitchen had a particular yellow tile in the splashback. The holidays were heavily attended by aunts and uncles, and the cousins were always allowed to stay up later than was reasonable. Pop went to Mass on Sundays. Mom kept a calendar. The Sox were a religion. The Patriots were a sub-religion. The Bruins were a sub-religion. The Celtics, when they were good, were a fourth religion. We had a basement. We had a yard. We had a snow shovel that lived by the side door from Thanksgiving to St. Patrick's. The list could go on. The list is mostly the list of every kid in every Newton-shaped town in 1980s America. There is no special key in there. What was a little less ordinary, and what I think actually matters to the story I am trying to tell, is that my mother was a reader. Not the casual reader, the serious reader. The reader who would, in the evenings, put down whatever paperback she was inside of, mark the page with a folded receipt, and tell me to come read the paragraph that had just moved her. She did this with novels. She did this with magazine essays. She did this, on at least one occasion I remember, with the back of a cereal box that had something written on it that was, accidentally, a small piece of accidental poetry. I learned in her presence that a sentence could be a small object that was worth holding up to the light. That is the only thing about my childhood that I would say to a person who asked me how an internist's son from a town outside Boston ended up at Brown University reading literature. Mary Claire, the reader. Everything else is just yard work. Brown was the kind of school that bends people. I arrived in Providence in September of 1997. I did not then know I wanted to be an actor. I knew I wanted to be a writer. I had been admitted to the English department, where eventually I would graduate with honors in 2002 with a degree in literatures in English, which is a Brown phrasing that means, roughly, we read things from various languages, but in English translation, and we will not pretend any of it is settled. I took a playwriting workshop. The professor was demanding in a way that 4 sessions in broke something useful loose in me. He said, and I am paraphrasing now from the sort of memory that has been smoothed by 25 years of telling, that I had a real ear for dialogue and no ear at all for a third act. He said it with affection. He said it the way a good teacher tells a kid he is going to have a long career in one specific thing. I left his office and walked to the dining hall, which we called the Ratty, for reasons that have mercifully slipped from my recollection. And I sat down with my tray, and I thought, all right then. What I am trying to say is that I had, by 20, a small confidence about a small thing. I could write a line that sounded like a person. I could imagine on the page a scene with 2 people talking. I could not yet write the third act. The third act would take me 10 more years. I want to interrupt myself here, because this is a love story and not an artist's memoir. And the temptation to write 3 pages about Brown is the temptation I have to learn to resist for as long as we are inside this book. So, I had a girlfriend at Brown. The relationship was the relationship a thoughtful 20-year-old has. which is to say intense and largely conducted in the cafeteria, and largely doomed by graduation, and largely defining of the shape of the next relationship in the way that all such relationships are. The relationship ended in the spring of senior year. The end was clean. It was nobody's villain. The girl I had been with had a life that pointed in a different direction. So did I. I'll try to be honest about one specific thing the early 20s relationships taught me, because it bears, much later, on the marriage I would eventually walk into. They taught me that I was not, by temperament, good at distance. I am the sort of person who, if I love a person, want to see that person every day. The friends I keep close. The sit-down with my mother on the phone is, even now, a weekly event. I am, and I will not pretend I am not, the husband, son, brother, friend, who, given the choice, would always rather have you in the room. I have moved cross-country for the women I have loved. I have, in the years before the woman who is, now, the woman, gotten on flights for short reasons and walked through airports happy to be doing it. I am not, in this, virtuous. I am just made this way. The relevance to this book is that by the time I crossed the room of a Los Angeles restaurant in November of 2008, I was 30 exactly. I had been on a show called The Office for 3 years. I was, in the language of the entertainment business, known. I had played, well enough, the kind of slightly romantic deadpan boy next door who is the protagonist of every workplace sitcom, and I had played him well enough that strangers at the LAX security line knew my name. I had a respectable 2.5 years of single 30s dating behind me. I had also, more pertinently, an internal disposition that the dating had not yet satisfied. The disposition was, I am ready to stop. I did not phrase it that way to myself. I did not phrase it any way to myself, because 30-year-old men do not phrase themselves to themselves with any accuracy. I had the disposition the way you have a barometric pressure. I was ready to settle into something, the way the New England year is sometimes, in late February, ready for spring. There was no spring yet. There was the apartment in West Hollywood, the call sheet, the friends. There was, on a particular Tuesday in November of that autumn of 2008, dinner with Justin Theroux. I knew Justin a little bit then, the way actors in their 30s, in late 2008 in Los Angeles, knew each other a little bit. We were not close. He had been recommended to me as a person to know. We had a meal we were having. We were having it. He was wearing, and this is the sort of detail that does not survive in the actual memory, but survives in the version of the memory that I have by now told often enough, what was probably a perfectly serviceable jacket. I was wearing a checked shirt, because in 2008, I was the kind of man who, in his 30s, wore a checked shirt to dinner. I was, in retrospect, not yet dressing for the woman I had not yet met. Across the room there was a table with a friend I recognized. The friend was Gray. Gray waved. I will not take you across the room. That is the prologue's job, and the prologue is Emily's, and she has done it. I will only say this. When I stood up, I did not have a plan. I did not have a line. I did not, in any conscious way, know that I was about to do the thing that the rest of my life was going to be, retroactively, organized around. I had only one small thought. The thought was, I would like to make her laugh. I'll say, in the chapters that follow, what happened. But I want to leave you with one image from earlier, the image that I think is the one that explains, more than anything from Brown or Newton, why I ended up walking across that room. It is a Tuesday evening. I am 11. My mother, Mary Claire, has just read me a paragraph from a paperback. She has marked the page with a folded receipt. She closes the book. She says, "And the words are exact, and they have lived in me ever since. Isn't that lovely?" She does not say it as a question. She is asking me to agree with her. She is asking me to recognize that a sentence in someone else's book on a Tuesday evening in Newton can be lovely. She is making me into the sort of man who, 18 years later, would notice a sentence on a face, a sentence in a laugh, a sentence in the way a person is wearing the dinner that she is at, and walk across a room. I do not know if my mother knew she was doing that. I know now that she was. Chapter 3. Emily, 2 doors. There is a thing that happens to an English actress in her early 20s, if she is lucky and the wind is right, that I have not, in the years since, found a tidy word for. It is the moment when you have, by repeated act of will, gotten the door open into the small dark room of professional theatre. The West End, the small but serious film, the BBC drama with a wig, and you discover almost at once that there is a second door in the back of that small dark room, and behind the second door is Los Angeles. Most English actresses never see the second door. Some, having seen it, refuse it. Some, having walked through it, come back. I walked through it. The story of why is mostly the story of one specific film I made in 2006. I was 23. I had spent 3 years working hard at what an English actress works hard at. Shakespeare, in the regional theatre, BBC television, one strange and quite good independent film called My Summer of Love, with a young actress named Natalie Press, a small part in Gideon's Daughter opposite Bill Nighy, that won me a Golden Globe in 2007, that, in the manner of all Golden Globes won at 23, embarrassed me more than it pleased me. I had also, in 2005, auditioned for a small part in an American film called The Devil Wears Prada, in which I would play a beleaguered British senior assistant named Emily Charlton. I read the script on a flight. I had the audition. I got the part. I did not, at the time, know what it would do. What it did is the second door. The film came out in June of 2006. It was not, by any metric, my film. It was Meryl Streep's film, and Anne Hathaway's, and the role I had was supporting, and small, and pinched, and witty, and English, in the precise way American casting directors want their English supporting roles. But when the film opened, and the dust settled, the small thing that had happened was that a generation of American moviegoers had now seen me. They did not necessarily know my name. They knew the face. They knew the line. The specific, eyebrow arched, I'm just one stomach flew away from my goal weight delivered to camera that, 20 years later, is still, on certain Saturday nights in certain bars in certain American cities, quoted in my direction by women slightly older than the women who quoted it the last time I was out. I was, in a way I had not asked to be, and in a way the next year would force me to figure out American. The way an English actress in 2007 becomes American is that she gets, suddenly, more script offers than she has had in her entire life so far. She gets, also, the option, the call from the agent that says, come do 6 weeks in Los Angeles. The audition pace is much faster. The work pays differently. You can have a life either side of the Atlantic, but you have to commit to one of them for the part of the year. That is the audition season. I committed to Los Angeles. I do not regret it, but I will not pretend that the commitment did not cost me one specific thing, the one specific thing it cost me. And you will read about this on the internet, so I am not telling you anything you cannot find, and I want to mention it once and then move past it, was a relationship I had with a Canadian musician named Michael Bublé. I had met him in Australia in 2005. We were together for 3 years. We were, in the year 2008, no longer together. The end of a relationship at 25 is a small private earthquake that does not move the things in other people's houses, but does move all the things in yours. I will not narrate the earthquake. I will say only this. By the spring of 2008, I was a single woman in her mid-20s who had walked through the second door and was now living half the year in Los Angeles, working and trying not to define the rest of her life by the absence in the kitchen. Let me tell you something. I have not, until now, put in writing. The thing about Los Angeles, in that autumn of 2008, for me, was that I had not yet figured out how to be alone in it. London, I knew how to be alone in. You walk, you read, you take a bus, you find a bench, you go home. Los Angeles is not, even now, a city where you can be alone the way the English are alone, which is to say, in motion. You can be alone in your car. You can be alone in your house. You cannot be alone in public the way the English can be alone in public. The result, for an English woman in her mid-20s in Los Angeles in late 2008, was that the dinners with friends had to be more of the life than they would have been in London. The dinner with friends was, in a manner of speaking, the public being of Emily Blunt that year. This is relevant, I think, to what happened at the restaurant in November. I was eating out a lot. I was eating out specifically with people I trusted, not the agents or the casting directors, but the small handful of friends who, in the way Los Angeles works, had become the actual reason I was happy to be in Los Angeles. Gray was one of those friends. Gray was an actor. Gray was, and I will not, in the habit of books, by Barron prose, embarrass him by quoting his Instagram bio at you, the sort of person who, when he sees you across a room, gives you the wave that means come over. The fact that 8 months after the end of my engagement, Gray was the friend I happened to be having dinner with, was a small accident of scheduling that I have since had to revise upward into one of the most consequential dinners of my life. I want to tell you what I was thinking that fall. I was thinking, according to all 25-year-olds who have just emerged from a long thing into a single thing, that I was going to be careful, not in the cold way, in the way where you have learned, the way the body learns, that the next person you let in is going to be a person you have actually looked at. I had had the first relationship of adult seriousness. I had had it for 3 years. I had walked out of it. The walking out, whatever else it had been, had made me into a person who knew what she was looking for in a way she had not known 18 months earlier. The thing she was looking for was kind. The thing she was looking for was funny. The thing she was looking for was, and I will say this clearly because it is the part of the public record version of me that the press cycles still do not quite know what to do with, unflashy. I had had, in my 20s, a relationship that had taken me to some of the most photographed places on earth. I had liked the relationship. I had not, particularly, liked the photographs. I was, on the November Tuesday in question, the kind of single 25-year-old woman who wanted, more than anything, to fall in love with a person who would not require, as part of the deal, that she stand on red carpets several times a month for the rest of her life. I was, in that sense, badly mismatched for the man I was about to meet. He was the lead actor in the most popular sitcom on American network television. He was on the cover of magazines. He had, that month, 1, a people's choice. He was, by the metrics of fame, in 2008, more famous than I was. He was also, and it is the part the metrics could not measure, exactly the person I had been waiting for. The way you can sometimes tell a person is exactly the person you have been waiting for is that the metrics that ought to disqualify them, the moment you sit down across from them, become small and slightly funny. The way most things become small and slightly funny when you are sitting across from a person who is, at that very moment, trying to make you laugh. Let me not take you across the room. We have done that. We will do it again, in more detail, in Chapter 5, because the chapter you are about to read after this one is John's, and the chapter after John's is mine again, and that one is the one where we sit down. I will only say this, about the months before November, the year 2008, there is a temptation when you are writing the love story of a famous couple to suggest that they had, before they met, been pointed at each other the whole time. They were not. We were not. I had been pointed at the second door, at Los Angeles, at the auditions, at the work. He had been pointed at the office, at his own peculiar version of the second door, at the work. We had been doing our jobs. We had been failing the relationships that preceded us in the ways those relationships needed to fail in order for us to be ready. We had been, both of us, not yet looking up. The accident is that we looked up on the same Tuesday. The accident is that Gray waved. The accident is, in the manner that all real love stories, not really an accident. But I won't here, chapter, give you the providential overlay. I am too English for that. I will give you only the version where two 20-something actors, on a Tuesday in November of 2008, were eating dinner at separate tables in the same restaurant in West Hollywood. One of them was English. One of them was from Newton. Neither of them, that morning, had known the other would be there. By 11 that night, they had each other's number. By the following March, they were in love. By the August after that, they were engaged. But that is the next two chapters. This one is about the door I walked through in 2006, which delivered me, 18 months later, to the city where the man I would marry was, the whole time, eating dinner with Justin Theroux. I am, at the end of this chapter, going to admit one small thing. I did not, in the months leading up to that Tuesday, believe I was about to meet anyone. I believed I was about to work. I believed I was about to put the engagement that had not survived the previous summer into the slow, private archive where one puts those things. I believed I was about to spend a year reading and saying yes to the right scripts and saying no to the wrong ones, and in the evenings, eating with friends because eating with friends is the only way an English actress survives Los Angeles. I was wrong about all of that, which is, on reflection, one of the most useful things about being 25. I laughed when I read this paragraph back. I laughed in the way I laugh most mornings these days, which is the laugh of someone who has, by accident of 2 decades of practice, become a person for whom the joke is just the way the kitchen is. Chapter 4. John, The Office Years. The thing about The Office, if you have never been in a hit ensemble, is that it is not, in the experience of the actor, a job. It is a household. You go to work in the morning, and the people you work with are the people you were with the day before, and they will be the people you are with the day after. You learn each other's coffee orders. You learn each other's allergies. You learn eventually each other's families. You become, and I do not use this word lightly, the sort of family that you cannot, even after the show is over, fully leave. I want to share about this because the years that lead up to November that autumn of 2008 are years I cannot honestly describe without the show. I had, the entire time, the show. The show was the floor under everything. The dating life was on top of the floor. The friendship life was on top of the floor. The slow, quiet, internal decision to be ready for the kind of woman I would, eventually, marry. That decision, too, was made on top of the floor. The floor was the office. Without the floor, the rest does not balance. I auditioned for Jim Halpert in February of 2004. I was 24. I had been in New York. I had been doing the things you do, small parts, plays, an embarrassing reel I had made with friends, the day job math of an actor who has not yet booked his first thing. I read the pilot script of The Office on the train. I read it again. I read it a third time. I knew, in the way you sometimes know. And I have learned to be careful about this knowing, because the actor who knows is usually the actor about to lose the part, that I could play this man. I do not, even now, fully understand why. The script was based on a British original. The American version was being made by Greg Daniels, who would, in the next decade, become the most respected showrunner in the format. The role was a deadpan but loving paper salesman trapped in a fluorescent-lit office in Scranton, Pennsylvania, who was in love with a receptionist who was engaged to someone else. The role required, at the structural level, the sort of stillness that I had not, in my training, been particularly good at. I was a slightly too fast, slightly too eager actor. The role required slowness. The role required, more than anything, the ability to look at a camera and say, with one small adjustment of the eyebrow, "Can you believe this?" I do not know why I knew I could do it. I knew I could. I got the part. I will skip the production history detail, because there are books that cover it better than this one will, and because this is a love story, and the love story is not the show. I will say only that the show began in March of 2005, with a pilot the network only barely picked up, that the show was almost cancelled after season 1, that by season 2, we had become the thing we became, and that by late 2008, in the form of all American network sitcoms that find their stride, we had become an institution. I was 30. I was on the cover of a magazine I had not, when I was 24 reading the pilot on the train, ever expected to be on the cover of. I was the universally liked guy at the universally liked show, which is a category of celebrity I will say something about, that the magazines never quite get right. The thing about being the universally liked guy at the universally liked show is that you become, in a way, you do not consent to, a stand-in. You become, for the women you date in your late 20s, slightly the man you play on television. You become, for the men you encounter at parties, slightly the man you play on television. You become, for the strangers at airports, slightly the man you play on television. The result is that you spend your late 20s trying to figure out which of you is, actually, you. The actor Jim Halpert and the man John Krasinski are not the same person. The man John Krasinski is, on his bad days, less patient than Jim Halpert. The man John Krasinski is, on his good days, funnier than Jim Halpert. The man John Krasinski is, more or less, all the time, slightly more eager to please than Jim Halpert. But the public could not, in 2008, fully tell the difference. This made dating, in the late 20s, complicated in a way I do not think most 30-year-olds at most other jobs have to figure out. I would meet a woman. She would have, on the slate behind her eyes, the rough outline of a man she had watched on a Thursday night for 3 years. The first 3 dinners were always, and I am paraphrasing now, but you will understand the paraphrase, Me trying to gently get her to put down the slate. Some women would put it down. Some women would not. I do not, in retrospect, blame either category. The category that did not put it down was, often, the women I should not have been at the dinner with in the first place. The category that did was the category I would almost always see again. The dating in those years was after the kind of all not yet married 30-year-old actor dating. Fine. It was fine. I was not, in the way of certain other actors of my generation, the men who treated his late 20s as a buffet. I had had, in college, the sort of girlfriend I have already mentioned. I had had, between college and the office, the kind of New York girlfriend who is part of every actor's New York to Los Angeles arc. I had had, in the early office years, one serious relationship that did not, in the end, become the one. I had, by mid-the-year, 2008, a small but real dating life, and the corresponding small but real, privately acknowledged fatigue. The fatigue was, I am ready to stop having dinner with strangers. I am going to be honest about this fatigue, because I think it explains, more than any other single thing about that fall, why I crossed the room. The fatigue was not depression. It was not heartbreak. It was the very specific fatigue of a 30-year-old man who has been dating long enough to know what he is looking for and has not, yet, found her. It is the fatigue that, in some other man, becomes a barfly's resignation. In me, it became a sharpened attention. I had become, in the last 3 or 4 months before November of 2008, the sort of single 30-year-old who was looking up, not desperately, not strategically, just more available in the room than the men around me. I was paying attention. I was the kind of guy who noticed the woman at the next table because he was, by disposition, ready to notice. Let me tell you something I have, until now, mostly kept private about that fall. In October of that autumn of 2008, a month before the dinner with Justin Theroux, I was on a plane back from a press junket. I do not remember what the press junket was for. The press junket is, when you are 30 and on a hit show, the sort of weather you sort of stop noticing. I had been doing them for 3 years. I had a window seat. The cabin lights were down. There was a half-empty plastic cup of bad red wine on my tray. I had, on the screen embedded in the seat in front of me, the menu. The small, bright blue menu of in-flight entertainment that, at 30,000 feet, in late 2008, mostly listed the same 6 recent films. One of the 6 was The Devil Wears Prada. I had not seen it. I had been working when it came out. I had heard about it the way you hear about films that are not your film, the sort of films that, in the year 2008, an American actor in his late 20s at a hit sitcom did not, in general, go to. I started it, mostly out of cabin boredom. I expected to fall asleep after the first act. I did not fall asleep. I will refrain in this chapter, pretend that I sat up at 30,000 feet and pointed at the small screen and said, of the actress in the second billed role, that one. I did not say that. I did not have a thought I could now describe as a thought. I had only a small, mute notice. The notice you get when, on the screen of an airplane in the dark, you see an actress doing something you recognize as a level of craft you do not, in your normal television rotation, get to see. I remember her. I remember thinking, who is that? I remember, in the manner of all small late-night observations, filing it without filing it. I did not know her name. I did not even fully clock that the actress in the second billed role was someone I would 6 weeks later meet. I have been trying to be careful, here, about retroactive romance. I do not believe in the story that says I had, on that plane, already met her. I did not. I had seen a film. I had noticed a performance. I had landed in Los Angeles, gone home to my apartment, gone to work the next morning, and forgotten about it. The notice was not a premonition. It was just a small piece of attention that 6 weeks later snapped into place when Gray made the introduction. The part of me that, on the November Tuesday in question, stood up and walked across the restaurant, the part that crossed the room, was not, I think, going to her because she had been in the film I watched on the plane. The part of me that crossed the room was the part of me that was, by the autumn of the year 2008, ready. The film had only made the readiness slightly more specific, or maybe it had made the room slightly smaller. I won't paragraph or any paragraph claim I knew. I will not claim it was fate. I will not claim the cabin lights had been the prologue. I will say only this. I have, in the 17 years since, been asked many times what the first thing was that I noticed about her. I have given many answers. The honest answer is that I do not remember. The answer I will give you here, which is the closest I have come in 17 years to the actual answer, is that the first thing I noticed about her was that I was already noticing. There is a difference between noticing a person and being a person who is noticing. In November of 2008, in a restaurant in West Hollywood, on a Tuesday I had not particularly been looking forward to, I was a person who was noticing. Gray waved. I stood up. I crossed the room. I will, in the next chapter, which is Emily's. Let her tell you what happened when I got there. Part 2, The Kitchen. Chapter 5. Emily, 3 weeks. He sat down. That is the part of the story I have always wished I could film, because it is, looking back, the part that contains everything that has happened since. He sat down. He did not sit down with the brittle confidence of an American actor at a hit show. He did not sit down with the practiced charm of the man who has done this before. He sat down with, and I have, in 17 years, tried to find the right word for this, and have failed. Interest. He was, in the first minute, interested. In Gray. In me. In what we were eating. In the question of whether I had been to this restaurant before. The interest was so consistent that around minute 4, I caught myself doing the small private thing one does when one realizes that the person across the table is being not a politician but a person. I leaned in slightly. I'll share, because it is the small detail I have never offered in any interview, what he ordered. He ordered pasta. He ordered pasta the way a person who has thought about it for 2 seconds orders pasta. Which is to say, he ordered it the way a person who has eaten in a lot of restaurants alone orders pasta. He was, even then, in the small visible ways an Englishwoman of 25 had been trained to notice, a kind eater. He thanked the waiter twice. He looked the waiter in the eye when he ordered. He did not, for the entire 10-minute span between when he sat down and when the food came, perform American masculinity at me. He performed instead the New England kid who had been raised by Mary Claire the reader. He performed listening. The conversation that night was not memorable, in the sense that I cannot now tell you what we said. The conversation was memorable, in the sense that 20 minutes in I knew I was going to give him my number. I had not, in 2 years of single life in Los Angeles, given my number to anyone at dinner. I had a rule. The rule was, the dinner is the dinner. If a man at a dinner wants to find me, he can, like everyone else, find me through my agent. The rule had served me. The rule had spared me, I want to mention, several specifically uncomfortable conversations. I broke the rule that night. Or, And that is the part of the memory I have, over the years, become more careful with. I would say, more accurately, that I forgot the rule. The rule did not survive the dinner. By the time we were standing on the sidewalk outside, gray having politely melted away the way gray was, generationally, the master of melting away, the rule had become small and irrelevant. He asked for my number. I gave him my number. He looked at his phone. He typed. He looked up. He said something that, knowing him as well as I now do, was almost certainly an attempt to be funny that landed only part way. I laughed anyway. I laughed because, as I had been quietly discovering all dinner, I was the kind of person who would, with him, laugh anyway. The phone rang the next afternoon. I aim to be careful here about the press tour version of the story. The press tour version is that the next 24 hours were a small whirlwind, that the first call became a first date, became a second date, became a third, all in a charming montage. The reality is slower and less charming. The reality is that the first call was awkward. He had, and he will tell you this himself, if you ask him, not yet figured out the part of his voice that is a phone call. He was better in person. He was, on the first phone call, audibly trying. I was, on the first phone call, audibly trying back. We made plans for dinner. We hung up. I sat down on the floor of my kitchen. The apartment I was renting then had a kitchen with an awkward galley, and I held the phone for what I would estimate, in the habit of any such estimates, was either 30 seconds or 4 minutes. I do not, even now, know which. The first 3 weeks I will give you in a single paragraph, because the 3 weeks are not, in the long arc of the story, what matters. We had dinners. We had a walk in Griffith Park. He came to the apartment I was renting, which had a kitchen with the awkward galley, and we made pasta. He cooked. He cooked the way Mary Claire's son cooks, which is the way an internist's wife had taught a boy to cook in Newton in the 1990s. Slowly, with respect for the pan, with the willingness to taste it twice. The pasta was good. The pasta was not the point. The point was that by the third weekend, I had figured out the thing I had not, in 3 years with the Canadian, ever fully figured out. The thing I had figured out was that I could, in his presence, be myself out loud. I want to put a finer point on this because I think it is the whole point. I had, until John, been with one serious man. The serious man had been, in many ways, a good and decent partner. The serious man had also been, and I will be careful here, because it is not my job in this book to slander a man I am no longer with. A man with whom the version of me that came to the kitchen was, by small ongoing degrees, slightly Emily on best behavior. Not in a cruel way, in the way of most 22-year-old relationships. I had not been the worst version of myself in that relationship. I had not been, in any specific kitchen scene I could now identify, the most version of myself either. With John, in the kitchen of the apartment I was renting in Los Angeles, on the third weekend, I was, for the first time in my adult life, the most version of myself. The kitchen scene that does this for me, the one I would put in a Christmas card if Christmas cards were a thing my husband and I sent, is small. He had burnt the garlic. The garlic was by any culinary metric gone. He was standing at the stove holding the pan slightly tilted, looking at the garlic the way the internist's son had been raised to look at a small disaster, and he said, and I am paraphrasing, because 17 years is a long time, but he said something that was, structurally, I have ruined the garlic. The Emily who had been with the Canadian would have said, "No, it's fine." The Emily who had been with her mother in the kitchen in Roehampton at age 8 said, instead, the thing that came up. I said, "Yeah, you have." He laughed. He laughed loudly. He laughed the way a person laughs when he has not, in the women he has dated in his late 20s, encountered the woman who is going to tell him the truth in the small ways. He laughed for what felt, in the small kitchen of the apartment I was renting, like 20 seconds. He laughed long enough that I started laughing. He laughed long enough that the garlic in the pan became, by no fault of its own, slightly funny. He scraped the garlic into the bin. He started the garlic over. He started the pasta over. We ate dinner an hour later than we had been planning to eat dinner. I will tell you the small private thing I noticed in that 20 seconds. I noticed that the most version of myself was not, in his presence, a problem. I noticed that, in fact, the most version of myself was the version he had walked across the restaurant for. This is the thing the press tour version always misses. The press tour version is that he made me laugh. The truer version, the version I am giving you here, because the book you are reading is not the press tour version, is that I made him laugh first. And he kept laughing. And when he kept laughing, the small adult woman in me, who had spent 2 years on her best behavior, stopped being on her best behavior. By late January of 2009, 3 months in, we had agreed, without ever saying it in the sort of articulated way that long-married people sometimes pretend their early relationship agreements take, that this was it. We had agreed by the way he stopped using his apartment as a single 30-year-old's apartment and started using mine as a 2-person apartment. We had agreed by the way I introduced him to my sister Felicity over Skype on a winter Saturday. We had agreed, by the way, when his mother called from Newton, he handed me the phone after 7 minutes and said, with the look on his face that he would carry into every kitchen for the next 17 years, "She wants to talk to you." I will not give you the engagement. The engagement is 2 chapters away. The engagement is in August. Between January and August was a lot of dinner, and a lot of his apartment, and a lot of mine, and 1 set visit to Scranton via Studio City, and a flight to London for Easter, so he could meet my father. The flight to London I will give you, briefly, in the next chapter, which is his. What I will leave you with, at the end of this one, is the small private thing I told my sister Felicity in late January of the year 2009. I called her. It was in London, around midnight. In Los Angeles, around 4 in the afternoon. She was in bed. She answered in the way only a sister answers, with the small, annoyed yes of a woman who would, if she did not love me, have not picked up. I said, with the precision of the older sister, but in fact the precision of the younger sister, doing an older sister voice on purpose to make her laugh. "Fliss, I think this one is the one." There was a beat. Felicity, who was one of the most sensible people I have ever met, who is now married to a man named Stanley Tucci, who you may know, said the thing that, coming from Felicity at midnight in London on a winter Tuesday in 2009, was the sister version of a benediction. She said, "Good." And then, because she is Felicity, she said, "Now go to sleep. You'll wreck him if you keep ringing me at this hour." I went to sleep. I did not wreck him. Chapter 6. John, meeting the barrister. I met Oliver Blunt, KC, my future father-in-law, in March of spring of 2009. The setting was a sitting room in a house in Roehampton on a Saturday afternoon. The window faced a garden. The garden was, according to all gardens in March in southwest London, on the cusp of doing something useful, but had not, yet, done it. There was tea. There was, on the small side table near the chair I was sitting in, a small plate with what I would later learn the English call a biscuit, but which any New England Catholic would have recognized at 50 paces as a cookie. There was Oliver Blunt, K.C. He was in a sweater. He was, from the moment I crossed the threshold, the calmest man I had ever met. I'll mention what I had been bracing for. I had been bracing for the kind of cross-examination an internist's son from Newton, Massachusetts, in his 30th year on Earth, on his first trip to London to meet the parents of a British woman he had been dating for 4 months, expected of a man who wore a wig to court for a living. I had been bracing, and I will not, even now, pretend I had not been bracing, for the question, what are your intentions? I had been bracing for the question the way you brace for a clear glass door at an airport. You do not, generally, walk through clear glass doors at airports, but you have been the sort of person who has, exactly once, walked into one, and the muscle memory is intact. The question never came. What came instead, and this is, I will mention now, the single most useful thing my father-in-law ever did for me, was a small silence. Oliver Blunt set down his tea. He looked at the garden. He looked at me. He did not, in the manner of all the men of his generation in his profession, lean in. He leaned, in fact, slightly back. He said, and these words are exact, because they are the words I have, since, told my own daughters about, although in a slightly age-appropriate translation. I'm told you make her laugh. I did not, for the first 3 seconds, know how to answer this. I had been bracing for a question that, in the formal way of a barrister, I could answer in the formal way an internist's son had been raised to answer. I had not been bracing for an observation that I was supposed to respond to. I think I said something like, yes, sir, I try. He nodded. He drank his tea. There was, after that, no further test. He asked me about Newton. He asked me about Brown. He asked me, with the precision of the man who had read the only book a barrister has time to read about American sitcoms, before he met the man dating his daughter, about the difference between filming on a soundstage and filming on location. I answered the questions. He listened. He asked at the end, with the specific kindness of a person who has been a parent for 30 years and a barrister for 40, whether I was hungry. I was hungry. We ate. The dinner was, for the rest of my life, the dinner I have measured every other dinner against. The dinner was Emily's mother, Joanna, doing roast chicken. The dinner was Felicity, 28 then, and recently arrived from her job at the literary agency, talking about a book she was about to take on. The dinner was Susanna, the youngest, 23, on leave from medical school, telling a story about a patient I will not repeat here because it was a small story, and it was Susanna's. The dinner was the brother Sebastian, by then 26, the eventual film producer, doing the thing all the Blunt siblings do, which is to talk at the same time without anyone losing the thread. I sat there, slightly bewildered. I'll tell you why I was bewildered. I was bewildered because in Newton, the dinners I had grown up at were dinners I was the entertainment of. I was the youngest. I was the one with the easy face. The deal at our dinners had been that I would, in exchange for being indulged, perform. I would tell the joke. I would have the impression. I would do the bit. The dinner had been, in the small Catholic theater of every Krasinski family Sunday, a one-man variety show. I had been good at the show. The show had been the foundation of the rest of my life. The dinner at the Blunts was not a one-man variety show. The dinner was 4 siblings and 2 parents who were all, simultaneously, the entertainment. The dinner was a quartet. The dinner did not need me to do my bit. The dinner needed me to listen. I had not, before that night, been in a room where I was supposed to listen. I listened. I will be honest about the small embarrassment of that listening. The embarrassment is that the listening was harder than the performing. The performing I knew. The performing was a Krasinski male's birthright. The listening was new. The listening required me to put down, for the first time in my adult life, the small toolkit I had been carrying since I was 11. The listening required me to be, and I will say this with the precision a New England Catholic man requires of himself, useful in silence. I was that night, marginally useful in silence. By the end of the meal, I had done what an internist's son, who had been raised by Mary Claire the Reader, was capable of doing, which is to say, I had said 3 sentences and asked 6 questions and laughed in the right places. I had, in the small private metric I had been quietly keeping all dinner, not embarrassed Emily. Emily had, at one point near the end of the meal, looked across the table at me and given me, without anyone else in the room noticing, the small private one eyebrow lift that I would, over the next 17 years, learn to read as you're doing well. Keep going. After dinner, I helped clear the plates. This is, possibly, the most important thing I have ever done. The clearing of the plates is, in the small theater of meeting a British woman's family, the moment that an American man either passes or fails. The British family, on the Meet the Parents weekend, is testing not whether you will be charming at dinner, but whether you will stand up after dinner. I had been raised by Mary Claire. I stood up after dinner. I cleared the plates. I scraped them, in the private ritual all Newton kids learn, into the bin near the kitchen door, and I stacked them, in the small ritual all Newton kids learn, on the counter, in the order they would have to go into the dishwasher. Felicity, who was, even then, the most observant person in any room, watched me do this for about 15 seconds without saying anything. Then, with the precise tone of a sister who has just made an irrevocable judgment about a man she has only just met but already substantially approved of, she said, "You do this at home, don't you?" I said yes. She said, "Good. She wouldn't survive someone who didn't." She wiped her hands on the tea towel. She nodded once at me. She walked back into the dining room. I do not, in the precise sense of the word, know when Emily and I decided, between ourselves, to get married. But if you asked me when the family decided, when the blunt women, the 4 of them, in their small private collective way, made the call, I would tell you it was that night, in the kitchen, when I was bent over the dishwasher rack, and Felicity decided, with 38 seconds of plate-scraping evidence, that I was going to do. We flew back to Los Angeles a week later. Between the Saturday in the sitting room and the Sunday on the plane back, Oliver Blunt KC had said exactly 13 sentences to me. I know because, in the quiet, private way of an American man who has just met a barrister, I had counted. Each of the 13 had been a small, useful sentence. Each of the 13 had moved the conversation one specific step. The barrister had been doing, all weekend, the work of the barrister, which is to say, the work of the listener who is, also, the one steering. By the time we were in the cab from Heathrow, I had decided. The deciding was not a moment. I will not pretend it was a moment. The deciding was, and this is true of every important decision I have made, before or since, a slow accumulating thing that on the cab ride from Heathrow finally arrived. I did not announce it. I did not, with Emily next to me in the back seat, with her head on the window, lean in and propose. The cab ride was not the proposal scene. The proposal scene was 5 months away. The cab ride was the inside of a head. The inside of the head said, in the small voice my mother had taught me at age 11, "Isn't that lovely?" I have, in the years since, told this story many times. I have told it in interviews. I have told it at our dinner table when our older daughter has been the right age to hear it. I have, on at least one occasion that, let me not book, narrate, told it to my mother, in the way a 36-year-old son tells his 66-year-old mother that the woman she raised him to be ready for has finally been found. In August, in a kitchen in Los Angeles, I asked Emily Blunt to marry me. She said yes. I will let her tell you that part. Chapter 7. Emily, the Ring. He proposed in the kitchen. I want to start there because I think the kitchen is, in retrospect, the most accurate single image of who we have been to each other. We did not have an engagement at the top of a mountain. We did not have an engagement on a boat off some Mediterranean coast that the magazines could later print a satellite photograph of. We had an engagement at the counter of a kitchen in a rented house in Los Angeles on an evening in August of the year 2009, with the dinner half-cooked and the dishwasher running and the summer light coming in through the window that, in Los Angeles, you can almost mistake for an English afternoon. The ring was a Neil Lane. I will, for the rest of this chapter, give you the small private detail of what that ring was, because I have never, in 17 years of being asked about it, given the small private detail. Neil Lane is the Los Angeles jeweler whose work, in 2009, was the work the women of the Hollywood quietly knew. The ring John had chosen was Edwardian. It was a 3-carat. It had, and I'll say this because it is the small detail I have always wanted to tell you and never have. A small filigree on the band that, if you held the ring up to a window, made a particular pattern of light on the wall behind your hand. The pattern was not, by any reasonable jeweler's accounting, the point of the ring. The pattern was the bonus. The pattern was, more or less, what every Neil Lane Edwardian 3-carat is doing on someone's hand when she holds it up to the window for the first time. John had not, when he chose the ring, known about the pattern. He had only, in a private way of someone who had been listening for 10 months, known that I do not like big things. He had known that the ring he chose needed to be small enough to be quiet. He had known that the Edwardian style, the older, the slightly worn-looking, the sort of ring you would have inherited from a grandmother if your grandmother had been the kind of grandmother who had owned this sort of ring, was the style I would, when he put it on my finger, recognize. He had been listening for 10 months. The ring was the listening, made into a small object. The proposal itself was, and I will be careful here, because I have been asked about this many times in interviews, and have, each time, given a version of it that is more press tour than true. The proposal was not a speech. He did not deliver a speech. The man I would marry is not, by temperament, a speech deliverer. He is, by temperament, a sentence builder. He builds, in any conversation, one sentence at a time. The proposal was the same. The proposal was, I have been thinking. I have something to ask you. Can we do this for the rest of our lives? That is approximately what he said. It is, in the habit of any such proposals, a paraphrase. I do not, on principle, transcribe the exact words a husband uses with his wife in their own kitchen. But the shape of the sentence is right. The shape was a question. He had been thinking. He had something to ask. He wanted to know whether we could do this for the rest of our lives. I said yes. I'll be honest about the yes. I have, in interviews, been characterized as having had the kind of yes that is associated with a long pause. I did not have a long pause. I had, in the half-second between the question and the answer, the sort of small internal weather that I think most people who have ever been proposed to in a kitchen have had. I had the small internal weather of, do I know him well enough yet? I had had the weather for about half a second. I had, with the precision the women of my family are raised to have about exactly these moments, recognized that the weather was not about whether I knew him well enough. The weather was about, am I going to be the woman who hesitates? I am not, on principle, the sort of woman who hesitates. I did not hesitate. I said yes. He cried. I won't, here, chapter, characterize what kind of cry, because the sort of cry a 30-year-old man has when his 3.5-year-old crush from an airplane screen says yes to him in a kitchen is not, in retrospect, the kind of cry that benefits from a narrator's adjectives. I will say only that he cried, and that I cried too, and that we stood in the kitchen in our rented house in Los Angeles for what was probably 4 minutes, and which felt at the time like a small interior eternity. I will say also, because it is the small detail that anyone who has read about the engagement will already know, that everyone cried, by which I mean that in the next 24 hours, when we told the people we needed to tell, the people we told cried. My mother cried on the phone from Roehampton. Felicity cried on a separate call from London. Mary Claire cried on a call from Newton. Oliver Blunt. KC did not cry because he is a barrister, but Oliver Blunt, KC said, after a long pause, "That's marvelous news, dear," in the exact way an English father says a sentence that is, structurally, a tear. The proposal had taken him, by his own subsequent admission, about 3 weeks of mental preparation. The ring he had bought 10 days earlier. The kitchen he had not particularly planned. He had been, in the careful private way of a 30-year-old at a hit sitcom, working out a more elaborate version that involved a restaurant and a candle. And on the morning of the day of the actual proposal, he had, in the particular way of a husband who had been listening for 10 months, decided that the more elaborate version was wrong for the woman he was proposing to. The woman he was proposing to was a kitchen woman. He proposed in a kitchen. He has, in 17 years, never once apologized for not having done it on a mountain. This is the whole point. The whole point is that the marriage we have had is, in its smaller daily metrics, the marriage of two people who would always, given the choice between a mountain and a kitchen, choose the kitchen. The marriage we have had is the marriage of two people who, at 26 and 30, had already learned the lesson most people learn at 60. The lesson is that the big moments of a life are not, in fact, the moments that hold the life. The kitchen moments are the moments that hold the life. The kitchen moments are the moments that, if you stack them right, become the sort of marriage that, even on the worst Tuesdays, does not, when the press cycle tries to write the breaking point article, actually break. We were married 11 months later, on the 10th of July, in 2010, at a villa on the western shore of a lake in northern Italy, at a place that did not belong to either of us, but had been generously offered by a friend of my fiancé's. The wedding, I will give you, in the next chapter. The wedding is John's. The wedding is, properly, his memory to give you, because the wedding was the only single event of our life together that he had, more thoroughly than I had, planned in his head. What I will leave you with, at the end of this chapter, is the small private thing I noticed at the kitchen counter the morning after the engagement. I had, in the years before John, owned exactly one ring. The one ring was a small silver thing my mother had given me on my 18th birthday. I had worn it for the 7 years, between then and the kitchen counter in August of the year 2009. On the morning after the engagement, I noticed that my hand had, without my consenting to it, in the way the hand sometimes does, gone to look at the new ring 12 times since I had stood up from the bed. I had not, in 7 years, looked at the silver ring on purpose 12 times. In a morning, the new ring caught light I had not, before, known the kitchen had. The new ring was the listening, made into a small object. The new ring was the kitchen, made into a thing on my hand. I will admit, with the wry self-knowledge that long marriages eventually require, that the laugh in our kitchen on most Tuesday mornings is the laugh of two people who long ago stopped pretending either of them was funnier than the other. We laughed about it. We are still laughing about it. The joke, as my husband says with the deadpan grin he learned in a Newton kitchen in 1989, is the marriage. Chapter 8. John, Villa, Oleandra. Let me get the borrowed house question out of the way first. We were married at George Clooney's villa. I will refrain, in this chapter, narrate how I came to be a person who could be invited to be married at George Clooney's villa. The relevant facts are public. I had, by 2010, become a working actor whose name was on a few call sheets that, by the standards of the Friendship Network, at the western edge of Lake Como, was the name that could, under generous circumstances, be invited. Clooney is a generous man. He had been generous to us. He had said, in a phone call, I will not, even now, do an impression of, that the villa was available. He had said it in the slightly too casual way that when an American actor in his mid-40s says something, you understand he means it. We had said yes. I want to mention what it feels like to be married at someone else's house. It feels, and that's the part of the wedding that no magazine has ever, I think, gotten right. Intimate. The villa was not, in any meaningful sense, ours. We had not been there before. We did not know which staircase to use. We did not know where the towels were kept. We were, on a morning of the wedding, 2 30-year-olds and a 27-year-old wandering around someone else's house, trying not to break anything. The very fact that we were not at home turned out to be the most useful structural fact of the wedding. We were guests at our own wedding. The pressure that an at-home wedding puts on a couple, the small 10,000 decision tree of where do the chairs go? Where do the flowers go? Where does Aunt Margaret sit? The borrowed villa wedding removed. The villa was the villa. The villa would, with us in it for one day, behave the way the villa always behaved. We were free to do the thing we had come to do, which was to get married. The guest list was small. I will give you the metric a magazine will not give you. There were fewer than 40 people. The 40 people were the 4 parents, the 7 siblings on both sides, plus their respective partners, 2 grandparents who were still living at the time, the small handful of friends who had become, by 2010, the actual friends. Stanley Tucci, who was at that point dating my sister-in-law Felicity, but had not yet married her, and who would, with the precision of an actor of his standing, be one of the most photographed faces at the wedding, without ever being the photographed face of it. Matt Damon and his wife, longtime friends. The Clooney circle, several of whom we knew through Emily's London work. The 2 priests, one Catholic and one Anglican, because we were a mixed tradition wedding and had decided, with the slow precision of 2 people who had been raised in different churches, that we would have both, and my brothers Paul and Kevin, who had, in the time since I was driven somewhere by Paul at 9, and told I would be one of those guys who got by on the face, become two of the most reliable men in my life. The dress was a Marchesa. I will let Emily eventually talk to you about the dress. I will say only that the dress was, which is the small visual I will give you of the morning of the wedding, the sort of dress that, in a corridor of the villa with the late morning Como light coming in sideways, photographed itself. Emily was, in the dress, the most physically beautiful she had ever been to me. I do not say this to flatter her. I say this because, the morning of July 10th, 2010, in a corridor of Villa Oleandra, walking past me on her way to the room where she would put the dress on, she was, and the word here is the only word that fits, recognizable. I had seen this woman before. I had seen this woman in the personal kitchen scenes of the previous 20 months. I had not, until that morning, seen the version of her that had been waiting underneath. The version that had been waiting underneath was the bride. We were married in a small chapel. The chapel was, by Italian standards, modest. By American standards, ancient. By any sensible standard for the wedding of two 30-year-old actors in 2010, exactly the right size. The vows were, in the specific way of an Anglican Catholic ceremony, mostly the standard vows. The Catholic priest spoke first. The Anglican priest spoke second. The exchange of rings was, and here is the small private thing only Emily and I and the two priests know, done with my hand visibly shaking. I had spent 20 months in a kitchen with this woman without my hands shaking. The fact that they shook in the chapel on the 7th decade of my mother's rosary was, and I will say this with the precision a New England Catholic man requires of himself, the only moment of the entire wedding in which I was, briefly, afraid. I was not afraid of marrying her. I was afraid in the unguarded way a man is sometimes afraid before he understands the shape of his own fear, of being good enough. I want to be careful here about the kind of vulnerability that is sometimes faked by male memoirists in the 3rd decade of their marriage, in the chapter about the wedding day. The vulnerability is not faked. The fear was the specific fear of a father who had not, until that morning, been a husband. The fear was the fear of someone who, having spent 20 months proving in small private kitchen scenes that he could do the small private kitchen scenes, was about to be asked to do a category of life he had never before been asked to do. The fear was the appropriate fear. The fear was the fear of someone who, in becoming a husband, was committing to do, for the rest of his life, on his worst Tuesdays, when the children were sick, when the work had not gone the way the work had been supposed to go, when the press cycle had decided that the marriage was about to break, the thing he had not yet fully done. The fear was the fear of being good enough on a Tuesday that had not yet happened. I did not, and here's the part, let me tell you with the precision a Brown literature major requires of himself, quite yet know that morning that I would be good enough on the Tuesday that had not yet happened. I have, in the 17 years since, mostly been good enough. I won't claim to have been always good enough. The Tuesdays were not always Tuesdays I rose to. There were Tuesdays I missed. There were Tuesdays the private small mercy of marriage was that Emily did not, on the Tuesdays I missed, hand me a small private accounting of the Tuesdays I had missed. The ordinary small mercy of marriage was that the Tuesdays added up the way Tuesdays add up, toward a thing that, by the time the rumor cycle in January of 2026 had decided it was a thing that was about to break, was not actually about to break. But all of that is later. The wedding itself after the chapel was, by the measure of the 700-person Hollywood weddings of the era, quiet. We had a dinner at long tables on a terrace overlooking the lake. There were speeches. Felicity gave the maid of honor speech, the only word for which is brilliant, because Felicity is, by profession, a literary agent, which is to say, a person who has read more first chapters than anyone in any room she will ever walk into. Paul, my older brother, gave the best man speech. The speech was, in the quiet Krasinski brother register, an extended and elegantly constructed riff on his prediction, from the car at age 9, that I would be one of those guys who got by on the face. The speech took the audience through what it would, structurally, look like for a younger brother to spend 21 years working in conscious opposition to a prediction that had ultimately been correct. I laughed for 2 minutes straight. Emily laughed for 3. My mother, Mary Claire, laughed once, in the small of a New England Catholic mother who is, in public, the proudest person in the room without ever permitting herself to look like the proudest person in the room. There was a first dance. I will not tell you the song. The song is one of the small private things that has stayed for 17 years ours. I will say only that the song was not, by any standard, the song you would have predicted. It was not the song the radio plays at 3 a.m. during the long married couple montage of a Hollywood romantic comedy. It was a song neither of our families had been particularly attached to. It was the song that, on a Tuesday evening in a kitchen in late January of 2009, the kitchen in which I had burnt the garlic, the kitchen in which my future wife had said, "Yeah, you have," and made me laugh for 20 seconds, had been playing low in the background. The song had, that night, been the song. The song became, on the night of the wedding, the song. The song is, in this year of 2026, in our apartment in Brooklyn, the song that, on certain rare Tuesdays, my wife will, without telling me she is about to do it, put on while she is doing something else in the kitchen, and which I will, hearing it, know without being told what she is asking for. She is asking me to come into the kitchen. I always do. The wedding, after the dance, became, in the quiet way of all good weddings, a long evening of small private moments that were, in fact, public moments. The 38 guests on the terrace ate. They drank a quantity of wine that the lake had probably, in the long history of the lake, seen larger versions of, but rarely on a Saturday in July. They told stories. They laughed at the stories. They watched Emily and me, with the small affection of the close family and friends, do the things every newly married couple does on the night of the wedding, which is, and you will not believe me on this, but it is true, mostly mill around saying thank you to people. I do not know when I stopped feeling afraid. I think I stopped feeling afraid when, around 11, I was standing on the terrace with a glass of water in my hand, looking at the lake, and Emily came up next to me, took the water out of my hand, drank half of it, and said, in the precise tone a wife has been entitled to since the moment the rings have been exchanged, "Come on." I came on. We went inside. The villa was someone else's house. The villa was, for one night, ours. Chapter 9. Emily, the first 3 years. I'd like to tell you about the apartment in West Hollywood with the bad sink. The apartment in West Hollywood with the bad sink was the apartment we lived in for the first 8 months of marriage, because we had, in the manner that 2 newly married actors in 2010 not yet figured out where exactly we were going to live. John had a place in West Hollywood. I had been mostly renting. We had, after the wedding in Lake Como and the small private week that followed the wedding, which, let me not book, narrate, returned to Los Angeles and moved into his place. His place had a sink. The sink, on the day we got back from honeymoon, did not work. I do not mean the sink was slow. I mean the sink, at some point during the previous month, while we had been in Italy, had decided to disconnect a small but important piece of itself from the wall behind it, in the way only a Los Angeles apartment sink does, and the sink was therefore not, in any operational sense, a sink. The sink was a hole. The hole was attached to a faucet. The faucet was attached to a wall. Below the faucet there was, instead of a sink, the sort of slow domestic emergency that a man and a woman in the first week of their marriage face for the first time, and decide, in that first facing, what the marriage will, structurally, do with such things. We laughed for 40 seconds. I have told you in earlier chapters that the kitchen was, from the start, the room. I am telling you here that the kitchen was also, from the start, the test. The kitchen had become, in the months between the burnt garlic and the dishwasher in Roehampton, and the kitchen in the rented house in August of spring of 2009, where the ring had caught light, the small repeated stage of the marriage we were about to build. The sink, on the day after our return from Como, was the first test of whether the marriage would, in the ordinary way we had been telling ourselves it would, also be the marriage at the kitchen. It was. We laughed for 40 seconds. We took out our phones. We did not call a plumber. We called my mother, who was an expert in the small theater of domestic emergency, who said, in the precise tone of an English mother on a Tuesday morning at her kitchen table in Roehampton, "Do you have a towel?" We had a towel, then put it under it. The plumber can wait 12 hours. The plumber could wait 12 hours. The first 3 years of marriage are, in the experience of an actress in her late 20s, mostly the years of waiting. We were, both of us, in the small career stretches that the late 20s are. I had had The Devil Wears Prada. I had not yet had Edge of Tomorrow. I had not yet had Mary Poppins Returns. I had, in those 3 years, a number of small, respectable films that I am, in retrospect, glad I made. The Adjustment Bureau, a 2011 film with Matt Damon, who you will recall from The Wedding Terrace. Looper, a 2012 film with Bruce Willis and a young actor named Joseph Gordon-Levitt, that turned out to be the kind of film that the sort of people who like the film do, in fact, like. The 5-Year Engagement, a 2012 romantic comedy with Jason Segel and Chris Pratt, which has, in retrospect, the funny structural distinction of having been the film I made about being engaged immediately after my own actual engagement and wedding had concluded. I want to share with you, for the small charm of the small, small thing, what the title of that film did to my husband for the entire shoot. The title of that film did, to my husband, the particular thing a husband cannot help doing when his wife is making a film called The 5-Year Engagement, 9 months after the wedding. He would, in the small, private way husbands sometimes do, walk into the kitchen of the apartment with the bad sink, holding a script for the day, and say, without looking up, "How is the 5-year engagement going today?" I would say, without looking up, "We are still engaged." He would say, and I am paraphrasing, but you will recognize the shape, "Good." We laughed about this for the entire shoot. The reason I am telling you about the 5-year engagement is that it is the small reminder that the first 3 years of a marriage are not, despite what the gauzy montages in romantic comedies suggest, the years of the wedding. The years of the wedding are about 37 seconds long. The years of the marriage are the years that come after. The years that come after, in our case, looked like two actors going to work in the morning, coming home in the evening, eating dinner in a kitchen with a sink that, after the first week, the plumber had eventually fixed, but which had, for the rest of the apartment's history, made a particular noise we had both come to associate with the marriage. I want to give you, in the middle of this chapter, the specific scene from 2012 that has, in the years since, become the private scene I think of when I am asked about the first 3 years. It is October. It is raining. We have moved, by the autumn of 2012, into our first proper house, a small but real house in a neighborhood of Los Angeles that I won't here book, name, because the ordinary small mercy of the modern memoir is the one specific street name a wife can refuse to give. The house is not a Hollywood house. The house is the house of two 30-something actors who have, at this stage, made enough money to buy a house, but who are, by temperament, neither of them, the people who buy the Hollywood house. The house has a kitchen. The kitchen has a window. The window faces a quiet tree that, in October of 2012, the rain is rattling against in a way I have, until this moment, mostly only experienced in London. John is at the counter. He is reading a script. The script is for a film he has been offered a small part in. The film is Big Miracle, a 2012 film about whales trapped in ice in Alaska. He is, in the small reading a script way of a 30-year-old who is deciding, weighing it. He looks up. He sees me at the table. He sees that I have, at the table, been doing the particular thing I have been doing for the previous 20 minutes, which is staring out the window at the tree. He says, and her words are exact, because they are the words I have, since, told my therapist about, although in a slightly elaborated translation, what's wrong? I say, nothing. He waits. He waits the wait my mother used to wait. He waits the wait of any man who has been raised by Mary Claire the reader, and who has, in 3 years of marriage, learned that the nothing his wife is offering at the kitchen table is not, in any meaningful sense, a nothing. I say, after a long pause, I think I want to have a baby. I had not, until that sentence came out of my mouth, known that I was about to say it. I had not, until that sentence came out of my mouth, known I had been thinking it. I will refrain, in this chapter, give you the 18 months that followed. The 18 months were the months of trying. The 18 months were the months of the small private weather that every couple trying to have a baby has, which is the weather of hope and the small repeated calibration of hope. The 18 months were the months of 2 doctor's appointments I will not narrate, and 1 long evening of crying in the private way I will not narrate. The 18 months were also, and what this is the part that the public record version of our family will never quite tell. The months in which the marriage acquired a particular layer that it had not, in the first 10 months, had. The layer was the layer of the thing we wanted together. We had, until we had a thing we wanted together, been 2 people who had loved each other in a kitchen. We became, with the wanting, 2 people who had loved each other in a kitchen and were now reaching toward a 3rd person. By February of 2014, we had Hazel. I will let John give you Hazel in the next chapter, because Hazel's birth is, more properly, the chapter of the father who tweeted on the day of the birth, and whose tweet, in the sort of way of a man who has been listening for 10 months and then 5 years, is the specific public record document of the first version of him as a father. What I will leave you with, at the end of this chapter, is the private kitchen scene from October of 2012. The scene at the table with the script in his hand and the rain on the window. That was, I now know, the ordinary scene the marriage had been organized to permit. He set the script down. He came to the table. He sat down across from me. He did not, in the way he could have, encourage me. He did not, in the way he could have, suggest a plan. He did the only thing that, in that kitchen, would have been the right thing. He took my hand across the table. He held it. He said, and his words are exact, "Okay." He said okay the way only a husband can say okay, meaning, "I have heard you. I am with you. We are now doing this." He said okay the way a Newton, Massachusetts, internist's son, who had been raised by Mary Claire the reader, had been raised to say okay to the most important sentence his wife had ever said to him. I will say with the precision an Englishwoman in her late 30s allows herself in the private retrospective of her own first 3 years of marriage, that the okay on that October afternoon in 2012 was the moment I became permanently sure that the man I had married was, in the long arc of every kitchen we would ever stand in, the right one. The rain stopped. Around 5. We made dinner. The dinner was good. The sink, which, in this new house, was a different sink, but which had, in the way all our sinks would in the years to come, somehow inherited the quiet noise of the first sink, was working. Part 3. The Family. Chapter 10. John, Hazel. I'd like to mention about the tweet. I do not, generally in interviews, want to talk about social media. There is, in the entertainment industry conversation of the last 15 years, a kind of fatigue about social media that I share with most of my friends in the business, which is the fatigue of a category of public communication that has, in the experience of most of us who have lived through its rise, mostly cost us more than it has given us. I am, by temperament, a private person. The decision to put anything on the internet at all is a decision I make slowly, and, generally, only when I have something I genuinely want to say. On February 16th, 2014, I had something I genuinely wanted to say. I posted that afternoon on the social media platform then called Twitter, the sentence that, for the rest of my life, will be the sentence I am most proud of having put on the internet. The sentence was, "Emily and I are so incredibly happy," his post said. Our daughter Hazel was, the rest of the post said, in the world today. The sentence was, by any reasonable accounting of internet communication, banal. There was no joke. There was no observation. There was no, and you will not, in this paragraph or any paragraph of this book, get a smaller word for it. Brand. The sentence was the sentence of a 34-year-old man on the afternoon his first child had been born. The sentence was the small sentence that, in the version of the day I had been living a few hours earlier, I had been the husband of a woman about to give birth, and which, in the version of the day I was living when I posted, I had become the father of a girl. The girl was Hazel. I won't tell you about the labor. The labor is not, in any meaningful sense, my story. The labor is Emily's. The labor is, in the form of all labors, the small private property of the woman who did it. I will say only, because the medical specifics are not, in any meaningful sense, public, that Hazel was born healthy, and that Emily was healthy, and that the particular way both of them were healthy, on the afternoon of February 16th, 2014, in a hospital in Los Angeles, was the way two halves of one family I had not yet known existed had decided, with the timing of all such things, to come into existence. I'll share, with the precision a 34-year-old new father owes the present tense moment, what the hospital room looked like. The hospital room was, and you will already know this if you have been in such a hospital room yourself, but I will say it anyway, small. The hospital room is always smaller than the press tour version of the story implies. The press tour version of the story implies a hospital suite with a large window and a small private feeling of having arrived. The reality is that the hospital room is the size of a Newton bathroom, and the window is whatever window the architect, in 1986, decided would be the architectural minimum, and the feeling is, for the first 45 minutes, medical. There are machines. There are nurses. There is the small quiet that is not, in fact, quiet, but which, in the moment, you experience as quiet because the rest of the day has been so much louder. We were in the hospital room for, I think, 3 hours before the particular quiet became the specific new room. By the new room, I mean the room of being 3. We had, until that afternoon, been a marriage of 2 people. We had, all the way back to the kitchen with the burnt garlic, been the private theater of the 2. We had, by the 3rd year of marriage, been so practiced in the ordinary theater of the 2 that the 2 had felt, in the quiet way 2 married people sometimes describe to each other in their rare, unguarded sentences, the whole answer. We were, on the way into the hospital that morning, still the 2. We were, in the way out of the hospital, 3 days later, with a daughter strapped into the car seat in the back. 3. I do not, in retrospect, fully know how to describe what changed about Emily in those 3 days. I will give you the quiet image. We were, on the afternoon of February 17th, 2014, the day after Hazel had been born, the day before we were discharged, sitting in the small hospital room with the small quiet that had, by then, become familiar. Hazel was asleep on Emily's chest. The light through the window was the late afternoon Los Angeles light. The blinds were partly down. There was, in the particular way of a hospital room in the United States in 2014, a television in the corner of the room playing CNN on mute, the closed captioning running. I was in the chair next to the bed. Emily said something to Hazel. She said it in a voice I had not, in 5 years of being with her, ever heard her use. The voice was not the voice the press tours had heard. The voice was not the voice the kitchen had heard. The voice was, in some small private way, the voice an English mother in 1990 must have used in a kitchen in Roehampton with a floury hand. The voice was the voice that says, to a thing the size of a particular loaf of bread, "Isn't that lovely?" The voice was the "Isn't that lovely" voice, said by an English woman of 31 to her own daughter who was at 3 hours old, asleep on her chest. I sat in the chair. I did not, in the specific of a 34-year-old new father, fully understand what I was watching. I understood only that I had, in becoming a husband, been given the small privilege of watching Mary Claire's voice come through Emily's voice into the particular ear of a child who would, in the years to come, learn from that voice what the voice meant. I understood only that the specific 7-word sentence I had heard my mother say at age 11 about a paragraph from a paperback was, in the late afternoon light of a hospital room in Los Angeles in February of 2014, being said by my wife to my daughter. I am, on the public record, not generally a man who cries on camera. I cried in the chair. I cried the way the husband of an Englishwoman cries when he understands, in a private instant, that the family he has been making with this woman is going to be a family that carries forward the voices. I cried the way the youngest of 3 Krasinski brothers cries when he understands, in an ordinary instant, that he is now responsible for the quiet way another human being is going to be heard. I cried the small cry that, in the years to come, would not, in any sentimental memoir's prose, ever be matched. I cried for, I think, 90 seconds. Emily did not, that I remember, look at me. Emily was, with the specific focus of a new mother of 36 hours, looking at the particular loaf of bread on her chest. After the 90 seconds, I wiped my face on the back of my hand. I stood up. I went to the window. I parted the blinds with my finger. I looked out at the parking lot of the hospital, which was, by then, in the early evening Los Angeles light, the color of certain parking lots in Newton in February of 1989. I had the small thought, with my finger between the blinds, that I had not, in the previous 5 years of being on a hit sitcom, been a man who took an idea outside of his own head to ask whether it was big enough to matter. I had been, with the easy face, the man who got by. I had been, in the simple the easy face had let me be, the man who had been allowed not to. I was not going to be that man anymore. I would, beginning that afternoon, be the father of a daughter. I want to put a finer point on this because I think it is the whole point of this chapter, and I will not, in the chapters to come, get a clearer window into it. The thing that happened to me in becoming Hazel's father was that the particular question I had been carrying since I was 11 years old, the "isn't that lovely" question, became, in the specific quiet of the hospital room, a question I was now going to have to answer for someone else. The question had been, all my life, the question my mother had been asking me to recognize as the right question. The question had become, with Hazel, the question I was going to have to be the one asking. I was going to have to be the one, in a kitchen in Brooklyn in 2030, holding up a paragraph from a paperback in the late afternoon and saying to my daughter, "Isn't that lovely?" I was going to have to be Mary Claire. I was going to have to be Mary Claire with, in a way, Mary Claire had not had to be, the private complicating fact of also being the husband of a woman whose mother had been doing this exact thing in Roehampton. The bar was high. I want to mention with the precision a 34-year-old man of decent self-knowledge owes the ordinary present tense moment that I had not, until that afternoon in the hospital room, fully understood how high. But I would, beginning that afternoon, try. I would, beginning that afternoon, try with the quiet consistency that Mary Claire had tried with me. I would, beginning that afternoon, try the small tweet. The Emily and I are so incredibly happy to welcome our daughter Hazel into the world today, and I would try, in the daily kitchen scenes of the years to come, the particular kitchen version of that tweet. I had been listening for 10 months in the year 2009. I had been listening for 5 more years since. I was, on the afternoon of February 16th, 2014, going to have to start speaking. I was, on the afternoon of February 16th, 2014, going to have to start speaking to a girl named Hazel. I have, in 12 years since, mostly done it. I have not, in 12 years since, always done it. But the trying, the small trying that began in the chair next to the hospital bed with my wife saying, "Isn't that lovely?" to a 3-hour-old daughter, has been, for me, the whole answer to the question of what sort of father I have become. I laughed when I read this paragraph back. I laughed in the way I laugh most mornings these days, which is the laugh of someone who has, by accident of 2 decades of practice, become a person for whom the joke is just the way the kitchen is. Chapter 11.
Emily, Park Slope.
We bought the brownstone in late 2014. The brownstone was, in the quiet way of brownstones in Park Slope in 2014, a particular kind of decision. We had been, for the first 4 years of marriage, 2 Los Angeles actors with a Los Angeles house. We were, with Hazel, no longer 2 Los Angeles actors with a Los Angeles house. We were 2 parents with a daughter who was, by the autumn of 2014, 8 months old and beginning to look at us with the specific expression of a person who would, in the years to come, expect a neighborhood. The Los Angeles house, for all the private reasons we had loved it, did not have a neighborhood. The Los Angeles house had a driveway. The driveway was attached to a car. The car was, by the autumn of 2014, the ordinary way Hazel was going to be transported for the rest of her childhood, between the quiet places her parents could afford to take her. I did not want her to grow up in a driveway. I wanted her to grow up in a stoop.
I want to tell you why.
I had grown up in Roehampton, in a neighborhood. I had walked, as a child, to a corner shop. I had ridden as a slightly older child, a bus. I had, in the ordinary way of a London childhood, been a small pedestrian. The particular pedestrianness of my childhood had been, for me, the small way I had become an adult who could be, on a London street at 25, alone, in motion. The particular way I had become an actress, also, the walking, the noticing, the slow accumulation of the specific type of person the audition rooms wanted me to play. I did not want, for Hazel, the private driveway childhood that Los Angeles in 2014 would have given her. I wanted, for Hazel, the ordinary stoop childhood. The stoop childhood in the United States in 2014 lived in Brooklyn. We talked about it, John and I, in the private way long-married couples talk about a thing they have already agreed on. The talking took, I think, 3 weeks. The deciding was, by the count of our marriage by 2014, which was a marriage that had, by then, accumulated 5 years of quiet kitchen scenes, fast. We bought the brownstone in late 2014. It was, by the metric of Park Slope brownstones, in 2014, a respectable but not absurd house. It had a stoop. The stoop faced a tree-lined street. The street was, in the sort of way of the streets of Park Slope in 2014, the street on which an English mother and an American father, with a small daughter named Hazel, could walk, in the early evening, to a corner shop. We walked, in the early evening, to a corner shop. I want to give you, after the kind of this chapter, the small image of the first 3 months of Brooklyn. The image is of Hazel, 8.5 months old, in a particular stroller, on the small Park Slope sidewalk, in the late October afternoon light of 2014. John is pushing the stroller. I am next to him. We are. And I will say this with the precision a 31-year-old new mother allows herself in retrospect, not yet famous on this sidewalk. The particular Park Slope sidewalk has not yet decided we are the Krasinskis. The specific Park Slope sidewalk is, in the particular way of all Park Slope sidewalks in the autumn of 2014, mostly looking at Hazel. The sidewalk is looking at Hazel because Hazel is the most beautiful baby on the sidewalk. The sidewalk is not, on October of 2014, looking at the parents pushing the stroller. We had 3 months of that. The 3 months, late October of 2014 through late January of 2015, were the private months of being anonymous parents. The 3 months were the months in which John and I, On the ordinary Park Slope sidewalks were two people pushing a stroller. The 3 months were the months in which the quiet Park Slope mothers, in the small Park Slope way, met us at the swings of the playground without registering. For a long enough time that we were, by the time we were recognized, already neighbors, that they had recognized us. By the time we were recognized, we were neighbors. This is, and I want to say it clearly because I think it is the particular gift that Park Slope gave us, the whole point of the brownstone. The brownstone was not the Park Slope house. The brownstone was the small, anonymous for 3 months house. The brownstone was the particular house in which our daughter was, in her first proper year of life, a child of a neighborhood that did not know who we were. The brownstone was the specific house in which Hazel learned to walk, late, around 18 months, in the particular way only daughters of working actors with international shoot schedules learn to walk late, on a private sidewalk that, by the time she was walking on it, did not know who her parents were. I am, in 2026 in our apartment at the Standish, the mother of 2 daughters who do not, in the small manner of any such daughters, know quite what it would have been like to grow up not the children of 2 recognizable parents. They will not know. The ordinary way I have with John tried to keep that quiet not knowing a thing they at least have near them is the small reason we have lived in Brooklyn instead of Los Angeles for the entire span of their childhood. I will not give you the particular roster of the films I made in the small years between Hazel's birth and Violet's. I made Into the Woods in 2014, which had been shot before Hazel, and which I, on at least one occasion, watched myself in while breastfeeding the daughter who would, in 2026, walk into the kitchen and ask why her mother had been a witch in a Disney film. I made Sicario in 2015, the particular film by Denis Villeneuve that was, in the quiet way of all the Villeneuve films, the sort of film that you do once, and you do not, in the years to come, fully undo. I had begun, by 2016, to be offered Mary Poppins. I had not, by the specific autumn of 2016 when Violet was born, said yes. I would say yes in 2017. But all of that is later. Again, like everything is later, in the ordinary way of a marriage in its 6th and 7th year. What I will leave you with, at the end of this chapter, is the private kitchen scene from the brownstone in Park Slope from the spring of 2015. Hazel 1 year old, Hazel sitting in a high chair, Hazel in the private way of a 1-year-old, regarding an ordinary cracker. John is at the counter. He is making something. I am at the table. The window faces the quiet garden of the small Park Slope brownstone we had, 6 months earlier, bought. Hazel says, to the cracker, in the kind of way of a 1-year-old who has not yet learned that she has invented her own first word, bah. I look at John. John looks at me. We laugh. We laugh the particular laugh of 2 parents in the small kitchen of the particular brownstone of the specific neighborhood that, by then, had become, without our asking it to, home. Hazel eats the cracker. The brownstone, on that spring afternoon in 2015, was working. Chapter 12. John, the 4th of July tweet. Violet was born in late June of 2016. I want to share, before I tell you about the tweet, the private detail about June of 2016 that, in the years since, has become an ordinary reference point for the way our family marks time. The quiet detail is that, on the day Violet was born, the small brownstone in Park Slope was, for the second time in a marriage by then 6 years old. Fully not enough. The brownstone had been, in the autumn of 2014, the particular park slope answer to the Los Angeles driveway. The brownstone had been, by the spring of 2015, with Hazel in the high chair, the small, perfect house. The brownstone had been, by the autumn of 2015, with Hazel beginning to walk, almost perfect. By the early summer of 2016, with Violet about to arrive, the brownstone, with all of its 3 floors and its particular garden and its specific stoop, was, in the manner of all brownstones with growing families, almost perfect, -1. The -1 was the second crib. The -1 was the private second changing table. The -1 was the ordinary way a brownstone is, by the time you have 2 children. The quiet, not quite enough. We had Violet in the brownstone. We did not, that summer, sell the brownstone. We would sell the brownstone 2 years later, in 2018, in the particular way our New York real estate decisions have been made, on a long Saturday morning of 2 parents at the kitchen table looking at each other and saying, with the small resignation of 2 adults who have done the particular math, yes, all right, we would, in 2021 or 2022, the small records of which I have, for reasons of the particular privacy of the family, never fully published, buy the specific Brooklyn apartment at a building called the Standish, where, in this year of 2026, the private family is living in the precise way the family has, by 2026, become accustomed to. But all of that is later. In June of 2016, in the brownstone with the ordinary second not yet built nursery, Violet arrived. Let me tell you, with the quiet care of a 36-year-old father who had, by then, been a husband for 6 years, and the father of 1 daughter for 2 1/3, what it was like to be the father of 2. It was, and I will say this with a small honesty, a Newton, Massachusetts internist's son owes himself harder. The press tour version is that the second child is easier. The press tour version is wrong. The second child is, in the careful of all second children, a redistribution of the particular economy of attention. Hazel had been, until Violet, the small monarch of our particular household. Hazel had been the specific child of the private brownstone in the ordinary park slope of 2014 to 2016. Hazel had been, in the quiet way only the firstborn ever is, the first. The arrival of Violet was, in the ordinary way of all second child arrivals, the quiet redistribution. Hazel was no longer the monarch. Hazel was now the small older sister of a particular younger sister, and the small older sister had not, in the private way of all particular older sisters, agreed to this arrangement. The first 3 months with Violet were, in the sort of way the brownstone learned to absorb them, the months of Hazel. I will tell you the specific scene that, in the years since, the family has told and retold. It is July 4th, 2016. Hazel is 2 1/3. Violet is 2 weeks old. We are in the brownstone. There is, on the private stoop of the ordinary brownstone, a quiet American flag bunting that, and this is the kind of detail my wife will, when she reads this chapter, accuse me of having invented for the charm, but which I am telling you is real. Emily had hung on the small stoop herself, on the particular morning of the 3rd, with Violet, 2 weeks old, strapped to her chest in a small carrier. Emily is, by temperament, an Englishwoman who has lived in America since 2006. Emily had not, in the first 6 years of marriage, decorated for the 4th of July. Emily was, one morning of the 3rd of July, 2016, with a 2-week-old daughter strapped to her chest, decorating for the 4th of July. The decorating was, in the way only newly second-time parents can be, a particular gesture toward holding it together. It was a specific gesture I have, in the years since, been grateful for, in the particular way husbands sometimes are. On the morning of the 4th itself, with the bunting on the stoop and the brownstone full of 2 daughters and the private quiet that, by then, the brownstone had begun to absorb in the way the kitchen absorbs, I posted, on the social media platform then called Twitter, the second sentence of my life I will be most proud of having put on the internet. The sentence, and I am quoting it now, because the sentence is in the public record and you can find it yourself, was, "What better way," his July 4 post said, "to celebrate the 4th. Then, to announce our 4th family member. Then, 2 weeks ago, we met our beautiful daughter Violet." The sentence is, and I will say this with the precision, a 36-year-old man who has, by then, written 1 passable script and 3 not yet passable scripts, owes the sentence, "Not very good." The sentence has, structurally, 3 exclamation points where one would have done. The sentence has, structurally, the wrong M- placement, in the exact way of the man who is. On the morning he is announcing his second daughter, not in fact editing for prose. The sentence is, by the reckoning of writers, bad. The sentence is, in the manner of fathers, perfect. The sentence is perfect because it is, in the soft only the announcements of second daughters can be, the ordinary casual. It does not, in the way the announcement of Hazel had not, in the way the announcement of Hazel had been the quiet we are so happy. It does not announce a child. It announces, with the small casual lift of 2 weeks ago, we met our beautiful daughter Violet, a particular family member. Violet, in the quiet way the Krasinskis would, in the years to come, talk about her, was already on the day of the announcement, a family member. She had been a family member, in fact, in the ordinary way of the second child, before she had arrived. The family had been, since the announcement of the pregnancy, waiting for the family member. The family member had arrived 2 weeks earlier. The Twitter announcement was, and it is the small reading of the sentence I would not, in 2016, have been able to give you, the particular registration of a fact that had, 2 weeks earlier, become a specific household fact. The household fact was that the family was now 4. We were now 4. I will mention, in the private way, only a Brown literature major in his late 30s will tell you, that the private 4-ness of the family was, in the sort of way of all 4-nesses, a different family than the ordinary 3-ness had been. The 3-ness had been the quiet triangle. The triangle had been, in the small Park Slope brownstone of 2014 to 2016, the particular most efficient shape. The 4-ness was, and I will say this with the small honesty of a person who has spent the last 10 years inside the 4-ness, the square. The square is, structurally, less efficient than the triangle. The square has, structurally, 4 corners that have to, in the habit of every such corners, be negotiated. The square has, in the particular way of every such squares, a diagonal. The diagonal in our case is, on most Tuesday evenings, the particular way Hazel and Emily, on the one side of the kitchen, and Violet and I on the other side of the kitchen, have, by 2026, become the specific factions the square has settled into. This is not, in any way, a problem. This is the private gift of the square. The gift of the square is that there are now, in the ordinary kitchen of the quiet apartment at the Standish, 4 people. There are, in the manner that the 4 people have, by this year of 2026, become the family, 4 small voices. Hazel, at 12, has begun, in the modest of all 12-year-olds, to develop a voice that is not, in any meaningful sense, the voice of either of her parents. Violet, at 9, has the particular voice of a younger sister who has, by the small economy of the second child, become the particular funniest one. The 4 voices on a given Tuesday evening are, in the quiet convention of any such Tuesday evenings, talking over each other. The talking over each other is, in the ordinary way of any such talkings over each other, the specific whole point. The talking over each other is the private Roehampton dinner I had, in March of 2009, sat at slightly bewildered. The talking over each other is the ordinary Brooklyn version of that dinner, and that is the quiet small mercy of having married into the Blunt family, the same small signal that the Roehampton dinner had had. The signal was that the dinner was, and is, and will be, a quartet. I would not, early on the morning of the 4th of July in 2016, in the particular brownstone of the small park slope of the particular year, have known to call it a quartet. I would have called it, in the private way of a 36-year-old new father of 2, only the family. It was, by then, the family. It has, in 10 years since, been only the family. The family is the specific answer to every question the rest of this book is going to ask. The family is the private reason that, on a January Tuesday in 2026, with the ordinary press cycle deciding the marriage was about to break, the marriage did not, in any meaningful sense, break. The family was, by the morning of the 4th of July in 2016, with Violet 2 weeks old and Hazel 2 1/3, and Emily on the quiet stoop with the small American flag bunting, already the family. I will let Emily, in the next chapter, tell you about the film we made after Violet's arrival. The film about a family in a quiet place protecting children from a thing in the dark. The film is, structurally, the love letter I will, in retrospect, admit I had not, at the time of writing the script, fully understood I was writing. I had been writing it for 2 daughters. I'd been writing it for the wife I had crossed the room for. I had been writing it, in the sort of habit of any such scripts, for the particular family of which I was, by the morning of the 4th of July in 2016, in the small park slope brownstone, the particular second-time father. The family was, on that morning, the square. The square is, 11 years later, still the family. The square. And that's the specific thing the tweet I posted that morning did not, in the private brevity of a 280-character announcement, fully say, is the ordinary whole answer. I will admit, with the wry self-knowledge that long marriages eventually require, that the laugh in our kitchen on most Tuesday mornings is the laugh of 2 people who long ago stopped pretending either of them was funnier than the other. We laughed about it. We are still laughing about it. The joke, as my husband says with the deadpan grin he learned in a Newton kitchen in 1989, is the marriage. Chapter 13. Emily, a quiet place. I read the script in a Park Slope kitchen on a Saturday in the winter of 2016. Violet was 4 months old. Hazel was nearly 3. John had been working on the script, without telling me what it was, for the better part of a year. The first draft had, by the time it arrived in my hands, been through several private writing sessions, and at least one rewrite that had, John would later tell me, made him scrap most of the previous draft. I knew only that he had been writing. I knew only that he had not, in the way he sometimes did with the lighter projects, asked me to read it as he went. I had assumed, with the small private misreading a wife sometimes makes of her husband's silences, that he was being slow about it, because the script was. And here was the misreading, not good enough. The script was, on the morning he gave it to me, in a cleanly printed binder. I opened it at the kitchen table. I read it in one sitting. I do not remember what I said when I finished. I remember what I did. I closed the binder. I put my hand flat on top of the binder. I looked at John, who was, with the precision of a husband who had, in some part of himself, been waiting 7 years for this exact moment, watching me from the other side of the kitchen. I did not, in the wife on best behavior way, say it's good. I did not, in the wife on best behavior way, say you've outdone yourself. I said, and the line is exact because they have, since, been the words John has dined out on whenever a film journalist has asked him what his wife thought when she read the script. I'd like to be in this. John told me later that, in the half second after I said it, the room had felt, to him, like the room had felt 7 years earlier, on the night he had stood up in a West Hollywood restaurant. He had, and he is allowed to say this in interviews because it is, structurally, true, not been certain that I would want to be in it. The script was a horror film. The script was an unconventional horror film, in that the dialogue was almost non-existent. The family in the film communicates almost entirely through sign language, because the creatures hunting the family hunt by sound, but the script was, by genre, still a horror film. I was, by 2016, a working actress with a long list of credits, very few of which were the horror genre. There had been a reasonable mathematical chance that the woman to whom my husband handed the binder would, with affection, hand it back. I did not hand it back. The reason I did not hand it back is the reason that, by the time the film opened on April 6th, 2018, the film was, in the manner of any working actress's metric of a project, the most personally rewarding piece of work I had done in 10 years of being an actress. I'll try to be careful about how I describe the reason. The press tours, in 2018, demanded a tidy version of the reason, the version that says the film was a love letter to our family. The press tour version is not wrong. The press tour version is, more accurately, incomplete. The film was also, in a way, that the press tours never had the time to get to. A love letter from John to me about the quiet theater I have been describing throughout this book. The theater of the kitchen, the theater of the not speaking, the theater of the two parents protecting two children from a thing in the dark. I had spent my career since the age of 7 on the inside of the theater of the voice. The stutter had given me, the door had been opened, the voice had been the work. The film John had written was a film in which the central artistic gesture of the entire piece was not speaking. The family in the film did not speak. The family in the film communicated through their hands. The family in the film survived by listening. There is something the wife of a thoughtful husband recognizes on the first read of a script he has written, without telling her he is writing it, that the journalists do not, by training, have time to recognize. I recognized, in the script he had handed me, that he had been listening to me, to the way I had been describing the marriage in the 7 years of kitchens we had built together, and he had written, with the precision of someone who had been a Brown literature major before he was an actor, a horror film whose structural metaphor was the marriage we had been quietly building. The marriage had been built since the year 2009 on the small ordinary discipline of not speaking. The not speaking in our marriage had never been the not speaking of distance. The not speaking had been the not speaking of attention. The not speaking had been the not speaking of the husband, who on a Sunday afternoon in Roehampton had cleared the plates without being asked. The not speaking had been the not speaking of the wife who, in a hospital room in Los Angeles, had said, "Isn't that lovely?" to a 3-hour-old daughter in a voice she had not, before that afternoon, ever used. The film was the not speaking, made into a film. The film, when John handed it to me at the kitchen table in late 2016, had not yet fully understood that this is what it was. The film would understand it. We filmed in upstate New York from May through November of 2017. The shoot was, in the conventions of working on a film with one's own husband, on which one's husband is also the director, uncomplicated. I had been afraid, going in, that the work-couple dynamic would, in the way these things sometimes do, leak back into the home dynamic. The work-couple dynamic did not leak. John, on the set, was. And this was the discovery of the shoot for both of us. A different person than John in the kitchen. John on the set was the director. The director had decisions to make. The director had the small weight of a film that he had also written and was also starring in. The director did not, on the set, have the bandwidth for the kitchen version of himself. The kitchen version waited until we got home. This separation was, in retrospect, the small private gift the film gave the marriage. The film had not, at any point in the shoot, asked the marriage to be the marriage on a set. The film had asked the marriage to be the marriage at home. The film had, in the particular way, only collaborative work between two practiced adults can, honored the marriage by leaving it alone. The film opened in April 2018. The opening weekend was, by the standards of every metric the studio had built, a surprise. The film was supposed to be a modest specialty release. The film was, by the end of the opening weekend, a wide release phenomenon. The film was, by the end of its theatrical run, the 7th highest grossing film of 2018, and for John, the first true confirmation that the slow private work of writing he had been doing in the brownstone for 10 years had been, in the way precisely of all slow private work, building toward the thing he was, in fact, going to do. We made the sequel 3 years later. John directed again. I was in it again. The sequel was, by the measure of all sequels, in which both spouses are again on camera, and one of them is again directing, easier than the first. The first had been the discovery. The second had been the consolidation. The two films, taken together, are the particular artistic record of a marriage in its middle years. But I am, at this point in the chapter, 8 years past the morning at the kitchen table in late 2016, and I have not yet given you the small scene I want to leave you with at the end of this chapter. The particular scene is from the evening of the day I finished reading the script. It is Saturday evening. The dinner has been cleared. Hazel is asleep upstairs. Violet, 4 months old, is asleep on John's chest in the limited way only Violet ever slept on a man's chest. Flat, like a wet leaf. John is in the chair by the window. I am on the couch across from him. The lamp is on. There is, on the specific side table next to the lamp, a glass of water, and the binder I have 3 hours earlier closed. I look at him. He looks at me over the top of our daughter's private scalp. I say, and the sentences are not exact, because we have, in the years since, somewhat polished them in the various press tour versions, but the shape is right. I think you wrote it about us. He does not deny it. He smiles, slightly, the ordinary smile of a husband who has been waiting to hear his wife say this for, I now think, the whole length of the writing. He says, after a long pause, "Yeah." He says after a longer pause, "I think I did." We sit in the lamplight. Violet does not, on his chest, move. Hazel does not, upstairs. Wake. The brownstone, around us, is the quiet brownstone of a park slope, Saturday evening in the autumn of 2016, with the small quiet that only park slope autumn evenings have. We were, that evening, the family the script had been written for. The script had not yet been the film, but the script had been the listening. The film, 18 months later, was the listening made into a film. The film, 8 years later, is still the listening, playing somewhere, every week, in the streaming archive of the world, in the kitchens of the strangers who recognize, in our family's particular not speaking, the small thing their own families are also, on their own evenings doing. I will admit, with the wry self-knowledge that long marriages eventually require, that the laugh in our kitchen on most Tuesday mornings is the laugh of two people who long ago stopped pretending either of them was funnier than the other. We laughed about it. We are still laughing about it. The joke, as my husband says, with the deadpan grin he learned in a Newton kitchen in 1989, is the marriage. Chapter 14. John the Standish. We sold the brownstone in 2018. I said the line to a reporter once, and it became, in the small way these things become things, the line that, for the rest of the public record memory of our Park Slope years, the press has carried. The line was about the brownstone being so beloved that whoever bought it next deserved to be the kind of person who could spend every night in it, implying gently that we, with the work that had begun to keep us on planes more than at home, were not anymore that sort of person. The line was charitable. The line was also, in the quiet private way I will admit to you here, partly a thing I said because I could not, in an interview with a real estate journalist, say the actual reason we were selling the brownstone. The actual reason was that the brownstone was no longer big enough. A 4-floor Park Slope brownstone is, by the count of normal American families, palatial, by the standards of 2 working actors whose lives have, since 2018, accumulated the particular overhead of 2 children, 2 sets of grandparents on 2 continents, 2 careers requiring rotating teams of agents and managers and assistants in and out of the building, and the specific accumulation of stuff that 2 careers in the entertainment business will, given a decade, generate. The brownstone was small. The brownstone was small in the way a small ship is small, once the ship has been at sea for 10 years. We needed a different ship. We found one eventually, in 2021, a full-floor apartment in a private newer building called the Standish, on the edge of the brownstone neighborhood, a few blocks from where Hazel and Violet had been, for the previous 7 and 4 years, respectively, growing up. The apartment was, by the metric of New York apartments, large. The apartment was, by the reckoning of the brownstone, organized differently. The apartment had, which is the ordinary architectural fact that 4 years into living in it has become the quiet most important fact of the apartment. 1 floor. The brownstone had been 4. The apartment was 1. The apartment was, in the quiet way only single-floor living can be, visible. From the kitchen, with the small kitchen at the center of the apartment, you could see everything. You could see the girls' rooms. You could see the particular corner of the small living room where Emily reads on weekend mornings. You could see, on a rare evening, the door of the particular office I had had built into the specific spare room, where I had, since the move, written the scripts that have become the private later work of my career. The visibility was the point. I'll mention why the visibility was the point, because it is the ordinary architectural translation of a quiet marital decision that, between 2018 and 2021, Emily and I had made without ever sitting down to make. The decision had been, we are not going to lose the kids in the house. By lose the kids in the house, I mean, and you will know what I mean if you have ever raised teenagers in a big house. The small way large square footage allows a family. Over the course of the years, a child is moving from 8 to 12 to 16 to disappear into separate rooms. The big house family is a family in which the children are, by the time they are 15, behind closed doors on a floor. The parents do not, on a given Tuesday evening, visit. The big house family is a family that has, by accident, organized itself for separation. The Park Slope brownstone, with its 4 floors and its particular stairwell and its small separate floor children's rooms, had, by 2018, with Hazel 4 and Violet 2, begun to be the kind of house that would, if we let it, become a big house family. We did not, by temperament, want a big house family. We wanted the particular quartet I have, throughout this book, been pointing at as the thing the Blunt family had at dinner in Roehampton. The quartet, structurally, requires being in the same room. The quartet cannot, by definition, be played from 4 separate floors. The quartet requires the specific open kitchen at the center of the private, visible household. The Standish, in 2021, was the ordinary architectural answer to the question. Let me not chapter, give you the quiet year of the move itself. The move itself was, in the ordinary way of all family moves that take a year of planning and a long Saturday of actually doing the moving, slow and mostly boring. I will give you instead the small gift the apartment turned out to be, which we did not, at the time of buying it, fully expect. The gift was the kitchen as the table. In the brownstone, the kitchen had been one room, and the dining room had been another. The kitchen, in the brownstone, had been the room you cooked in. The dining room, in the brownstone, had been the room you ate in. The arrangement had been, by the particular standards of the way 2 people had been raised, one in a Roehampton dining room and one in a Newton kitchen. Fine. The arrangement had not, however, been the family. The family, in the brownstone, had moved between rooms. In the apartment at the Standish, the kitchen was the table. There was, in the small architectural decision that turned out to be the particular best decision of the entire renovation, no separate dining room. There was instead a large kitchen with a large kitchen table at one end of it. The table seated 8. The 8-seat table was the specific architectural insistence that, on any given evening, the family eat where the food had been made. The table was the private architectural insistence that the ordinary quartet play together. The table has, in 5 years now, been the table. I want to mention with the quiet honesty a Brown literature major in his late 40s owes himself that the small table and the particular architectural insistence on the small quartet has been, in the years between 2021 and 2026, the particular reason that the family has continued to be the family. The kids could have been, by 2024, the kids of separate floors. The kids are not. The kids are, on most Tuesday evenings, at the table. Hazel, who is 12, is at the table. Violet, who is 9, is at the table. Emily is at the table. I am at the table. The 4 of us, on most Tuesday evenings, are at the table together. The 4 of us, on most Tuesday evenings, are talking over each other. The talking over each other is, as I have said, the specific whole point. I want to leave you, at the end of this chapter, with the private scene from the autumn of 2022 that has, in the years since, become the ordinary image I think of when I am asked about the Standish. It is October. It is raining. Hazel is 8. Violet is 6. Emily is at the kitchen counter making something, and I won't, here, chapter, tell you what, because the quiet recipe is the small recipe of the blunt women, and the blunt women have, as a matter of principle, not had their recipes printed in books that are not the blunt women's books. I am at the kitchen table. The girls are on the floor of the kitchen with a particular pile of books. The window faces a small Brooklyn view that, in the autumn rain of 2022, is the particular view of an apartment that we have, by then, lived in for 16 months, and that has, by then, become the specific home the brownstone had been before it. Hazel, on the floor, says, without looking up, "Dad, listen to this." She reads a paragraph. The paragraph is from a book I do not now remember the title of. The paragraph is the sort of paragraph an 8-year-old who has been raised by an English mother and an American father who have, both of them, been raised by readers, reads aloud. The paragraph is, in the private manner of any such paragraphs, a private lovely thing. Emily looks up from the counter. She catches my eye. She does not say, "Isn't that lovely?" She does not have to. I look at our daughter on the floor. I say, the way Mary Claire would have said it on a Tuesday evening in Newton in 1991. The ordinary 7 words she would have said, "Isn't that lovely?" Hazel does not look up. Hazel is on to the next paragraph. Violet, who is 6, says, "I want to turn." Hazel hands her the book. The kitchen, in the autumn rain of 2022, was working. The kitchen, in the autumn of this year of 2026, as I am telling you this, is still working. The apartment was, and is, the quiet architectural answer. I will admit, with the wry self-knowledge that long marriages eventually require, that the laugh in our kitchen on most Tuesday mornings is the laugh of 2 people who long ago stopped pretending either of them was funnier than the other. We laughed about it. We are still laughing about it. The joke, as my husband says with the deadpan grin he learned in a Newton kitchen in 1989, is the marriage. Part 4. The Long Marriage. Chapter 15. Emily. The Years of the Cameras. I'd like to tell you about a stretch of the marriage that I have, in the press tours of those years, been the least good at describing. The stretch is the one that ran from the spring of 2021, when the world began to come back from the pandemic, to the autumn of 2024, when Oppenheimer finally won its statues. The stretch is the stretch in which my career did, in the way these things sometimes do without warning, the thing it had been threatening since The Devil Wears Prada to do, which is to say, the thing where the films I was being offered began to be the films I had, all my life, been hoping I would be offered. The years 2021 through 2024 were the years I made A Quiet Place Part 2, which I had filmed before the pandemic and which finally released in May of 2021. Jungle Cruise, the summer blockbuster project with Dwayne Johnson. The English, the Western mini-series for BBC and Amazon that, by some accounting I am still grateful for, will be in the obituary. And most prominently, Oppenheimer, the Christopher Nolan film about the physicist and the bomb, in which I played the wife, Kitty Oppenheimer. The film opened in July of 2023. The film was a critical and commercial event that I had not, on any of my previous press tours, been at the center of. The film was nominated for 13 Academy Awards. I was nominated for Best Supporting Actress. The film won 7, including Best Picture. I did not, in the end, win the Supporting Actress award. I lost it to Davine Joy Randolph for The Holdovers, who had been wonderful and who deserved it, and who was, in a private way these things go, the only person in the room I had been hoping would beat me if I lost. I want to share with you what those years were like for the marriage. The years were busy. I had been, until 2021, the wife with the small roster of films a working actress in her 30s can reasonably make while raising 2 young children with a husband who is also a working actor. I had, and I want to say this clearly, because the press cycle never fully reads it correctly, chosen the particular roster. I had said no to a number of projects between 2014 and 2020 that I had said no to specifically because Hazel was small and Violet was smaller, and the small math of 2 actor parents on 2 simultaneous shoots is the math of 1 parent has to be home. I had been, by my own design, the parent who had been for those years more home. I do not regret it. I will refrain, in this chapter, pretend I made the choice in a flag-waving moment of maternal abnegation. I made the choice in the careful private way every working mother makes such choices, which is over the course of a long Saturday morning at the kitchen counter, weighing the script in her hand against the particular weight of the child whose head was on her shoulder. By 2021, with Violet 5 and Hazel 7, with the apartment at the Standish in the middle of its renovation, with the specific architectural insistence on the quartet about to be turned into the daily reality of the kitchen as the table, I had, for the first time in 7 years, the private bandwidth to take the bigger jobs. I took them. A Quiet Place. Part 2 had been in the can. Jungle Cruise shot in the way Hawaii does. 3 months. Intense, on location, with the ordinary arrangement that, on the weekends, John could fly out with the girls and we could be the family in a hotel pool. The English shot in Spain. Oppenheimer shot primarily in Los Alamos and Princeton and various Los Angeles sound stages. In the quiet, intense schedule, a Christopher Nolan film makes the actors keep. The years were the years of the cameras. By the cameras, I mean the small way the particular Brooklyn sidewalk we had moved to in 2014, which had given us, for the first 3 months of Hazel's life, the small anonymous for 3 months gift had, by 2023, with Oppenheimer in its press cycle, become the particular paparazzi-staked sidewalk that the press cycle expected the sidewalk to be. The cameras were on the sidewalk. The cameras were at the corner of the specific block we lived on. The cameras were at the door of the private dry cleaner I had been using for 3 years. The cameras were, on the morning I walked Hazel to her ordinary school, also on the sidewalk outside the school, because in the particular way the press cycle of a Christopher Nolan film operates, the cameras at the door of the dry cleaner were not enough cameras. I won't describe to you the small private discipline the marriage built between 2021 and 2024 for managing the cameras. The small private discipline is the small private discipline of every famous couple marriage. It is, for the readers of this book who have never had to think about it, mostly a matter of consistency. You walk to the corner the same way every day. You do not, on the days the cameras are there, change your route. You do not, on the days the cameras are not there, behave any differently than you do on the days the cameras are. The consistency is the quiet erosion of the cameras. The cameras, given a long enough year of consistency, eventually become bored. The cameras are not, in the very way the press cycles tell you they are, interested. The cameras are paid. The cameras stop being paid when the cameras stop getting the shot that pays them. The shot that pays them is, in the small of all paparazzi shots, the shot of the famous person doing the thing. The famous person does not do every day. We did the same thing every day. We were boring on purpose. The boring on purpose was, in the quiet way the years 2021 to 2024 figured it out, the small gift of the apartment at the Standish. The apartment had been built in the ordinary way I have described in the previous chapter, for the particular architectural insistence on the quartet. The apartment had also, in a small way we had not, when we bought it, fully anticipated, been built for the particular boring on purpose of two working actors who needed, by 2023, the specific architectural shield of an apartment that was not, from any sidewalk angle, photographable. The brownstone, in 2014, had been photographable. The apartment at the Standish, in 2021, was not. The cameras could, on a given Tuesday afternoon, photograph the building. The cameras could not photograph the kitchen. The cameras could not photograph the private table. The cameras could not, in the private way. Only the right floor of the right building can spare you. See in. The seeing in was, in the years 2021 to 2024, the ordinary privacy line the family, without ever announcing it, drew. I'll tell you the quiet scene from the night of the Oppenheimer premiere in July of 2023 that has, in the years since, become the small image I think of when I am asked about the years of the cameras. We had, at the particular outdoor premiere in London on a small July evening, the particular premiere experience two famous actors have. The carpet had been the carpet. The cameras had been the cameras. The studio had been pleased. We had said the specific things one says on the private carpets of the ordinary premieres of the quiet Christopher Nolan films of the small summer the particular film was about to define. We had then gone at midnight with John to the small hotel room of the particular London hotel that had, for the duration of the specific London leg of the private press tour, been our ordinary room. The room had a quiet window. The window faced the small London street that, even on a particular July night at midnight, was the small London I had, 20 years earlier, walked through. I sat on the particular bed. I did not, in the sort of way of all moments, look at John. I said, and that line is exact because they are the words I have, in the personal way of every wife at every premiere night of every film she has ever made, said to the husband who has, with the specific patience of all such husbands, sat next to her through the private carpet, I am going to bed. John said, and the wording is also exact. Right. He turned off the ordinary lamp. The quiet premiere on the small London night of July 13, 2023, was over. The marriage was, in the morning of July 14th, 2023, the marriage between 2021 and 2024 was, through the particular erosion of the cameras and the small architectural shield of the apartment and the particular boring on purpose of the boring on purpose, still the marriage. I will not give you the specific Oscar morning of March 10th, 2024. The Oscar morning is, in the habit of all Oscar mornings, a private event that lives more vividly in the press archive than it does in the ordinary kitchen of the Standish, where, on the morning when March 11th, 2024, the quiet Hazel and the small Violet woke up the same way they had woken up the morning March 10th. The Oscar morning is not, on the particular record of the marriage, the important morning. The important morning is, in the particular habit of every such mornings, the small morning of the kitchen, on the day after the morning the cameras stopped paying attention. I would have, in the years 2025 and 2026, more such mornings. I will give you one of them, the particular morning of April 30th, 2026, in the chapter after this one. What I will leave you with, at the end of this chapter, is the specific insight the years of the cameras gave me about the marriage. The insight is that the marriage was not, in any meaningful sense, strained by the cameras. The marriage had been, the entire time, the marriage at the kitchen. The kitchen had been, the entire time, the private room the cameras could not see. The marriage had been, from the beginning, the marriage the cameras could not, by the ordinary architecture of the quiet apartment, see. The cameras had been the small weather. The kitchen had been the particular house. We had, throughout the years of the cameras, been the small family in the house and the weather. The family had been, in the specific way of every such families, fine. I will admit, with the wry self-knowledge that long marriages eventually require, that the laugh in our kitchen on most Tuesday mornings is the laugh of two people who long ago stopped pretending either of them was funnier than the other. We laughed about it. We are still laughing about it. The joke, as my husband says with the deadpan grin he learned in a Newton kitchen in 1989, is the marriage. Chapter 16, January. Let me tell you what happened in January. I will not begin this chapter by quoting any of the headlines. I will not give you the names of the websites. I will not link to the insider sources. If you have been following our marriage on the internet, you already know which week of January it was. If you have not been, you will not, by the end of this chapter, need to. What happened in January was that a story circulated for about 3 weeks that our marriage was on the brink. The story had a thesis. The thesis was that two career trajectories that had, since 2018, been on slightly different escalators, mine flatter, hers steeper, were finally, in the unguarded way these things sometimes do, exerting the structural strain on a long marriage that long marriages, in the celebrity press version of the world, are supposed to give way under. The story was not true. I will not, here, perform the work of refuting the story. The work of refuting the story would, by undertaking it in print in a book like this one, give the story more dignity than the story deserves. The story had a brief life. The story was, by the time it had a brief life, mostly the work of an insider source who had been paid to say a thing that the website that had paid the insider source wanted said. The story was, in the small convention of any such stories, the particular bait the press cycle had decided to put in the water that week. The story is the price of being two famous people in the press cycle of this year, of 2026. What I want to talk about in this chapter is what the week of the story was actually like inside the apartment at the Standish. The week of the story was not a week of crisis. The week of the story was a week in which our apartment at the Standish, with the kitchen at the center and the table where we eat, was, on every evening, the apartment at the Standish, with the kitchen at the center and the table where we eat. The girls had school. The girls came home from school. The dinner had been, on the Monday, pasta. The dinner had been, on the Tuesday, fish. The dinner had been, on the Wednesday, what we call Wednesday leftovers, which is the specific way our family pretends that not having decided what to cook is, in fact, a tradition. The dinner had been, on the Thursday, the private takeout from the ordinary Vietnamese place around the corner. The dinner had been, on the Friday, the chicken Emily had been working on for 2 hours, in a way that every Friday she works on the chicken for 2 hours. The dinners were the dinners. I am going to be careful about how I describe the small private accounting Emily and I did during the week of the story, of whether the story would affect the family. We made it once, not in a long conversation. We made it on the Wednesday morning of the week of the story, with the dishwasher running and the quiet yellow light of the kitchen in the small Park Slope January way it has, by then, after 5 years in the apartment, made for us. I was at the counter. She was at the table. I said something to her, in the particular shorthand that married couples build over 15 years of marriage. That meant, without my having to say more than the small shorthand, "Are we addressing this?" She said something to me in the same shorthand that meant, without her having to say more, "No, we are not addressing this. We are doing nothing. We are going on with the week." I'd like to mention what doing nothing meant. Doing nothing, in the quiet way of two famous people in a press cycle, is not, in fact, doing nothing. It is the most demanding form of doing anything at all. It is the form that requires you to walk out of your apartment building at the same time you would have walked out anyway. It is the form that requires you to walk to the particular Brooklyn corner shop you would have walked to anyway. It is the form that requires you to, on a Saturday evening of the week the headlines are running, leave the apartment and walk to the specific neighborhood Italian restaurant you have been going to for 3 years and have dinner and walk home. It is the form that requires you to do all of this without performing it. The cameras, in such a week, are looking for the performance. The cameras are looking for the private hand on the small of the back of two famous people walking out of their apartment building who are trying, in the ordinary way of any such pairs, to look like a couple. The cameras want, in such a week, the ordinary stagedness that will, in the photographs, make the story plausible. We did not stage anything. We walked out the way we had walked out on the Saturday before, and the Saturday before that, and every Saturday going back to 2021, when we had moved into the building. We walked the way two people walk when they have walked next to each other this way for 15 years. We did not, on any of the Saturdays of the week of the story, hold hands. We have, in 15 years, not been the kind of couple who walks holding hands on Brooklyn sidewalks. We are the sort of couple who walk slightly close together, with our quiet gait, that anyone who has watched us on a Brooklyn sidewalk for more than 90 seconds can tell, by the small gait, has been the gait of two people who walk together. The gait is not, by any measure, a performance. The gait is the gait. It has been the gait on the particular Brooklyn sidewalks of our marriage since 2014. The Saturday photographs from the week of the story show the gait. The Saturday photographs were used by some of the websites to argue against the story. The Saturday photographs were used by some of the other websites to argue for the story, under the small reading that the gait was, on those Saturdays, slightly too casual to be unstaged. The two readings of the same photographs are, in the private way of celebrity press cycles, the particular reading economy that the celebrity press operates on. We did not, on any of the Saturday afternoons of the week of the story, sit down to discuss either reading. We had, by January of 2026, been doing the gait for 15 years. The gait, in any version, is the gait we walk. The story ended. I do not mean the story ended in a single moment. I mean, in the kind of way these things end, the story slowly stopped paying. The websites that had been running the story stopped running the story, because the websites that had been running the story were, in the way the modern celebrity press economy works, getting fewer clicks per refresh than the story had, in week 1, been giving them. The story moved off the front pages. The story moved into the search archive. The story has been, since the end of January 2026, available to anyone who searches for it. The story is no longer, by the running metric of the press, the story. What happened in the 4 months between the end of the story and the morning I am writing this chapter is what the next chapter is going to be about. Emily will tell you. Emily will tell you in the way she has been telling me on most evenings since the end of January that the specific response of our family to the story was, in retrospect, the most important thing the marriage has done in 5 years. What the response was, in shorthand, was that we kept doing what we had been doing. We kept walking out the door of the apartment building at the same time we had been walking out. We kept going to the private Italian restaurant. We kept eating the dinners. We kept the ordinary quartet at the quiet table. We kept, on the small Walk of Fame morning of April 30th, this year of 2026, 3 months after the end of the story, saying the particular true things about the small person across the room. I'll say, in this chapter's closing, the particular image that I have been carrying with me since the morning of January 14th, 2026, the day I now think of as the day the story was at its highest pitch. The image is of Emily on the specific morning of January 14th at the kitchen counter of the apartment at the Standish, with the private mug of ordinary tea in her hand, looking at me across the quiet kitchen, with the small yellow light of the particular January morning coming through the small window. She did not, on that morning, look at me with the particular worry that the press cycle would, in the particular way of all press cycles, have wanted to see on her face. She did not look at me with the specific defiance that the press cycle would have wanted to see. She did not, in any sense, look at me with the private performance of a woman holding her marriage together under the ordinary scrutiny of the cameras. She looked at me on the quiet January morning with the small patience of an Englishwoman who has known the man across the kitchen for 18 years. She said, and the words are exact, "Toast," I said. And these words are also exact, "Yes, please." She made the toast. I drank the particular tea that she had, on that morning of January 14th, also made for me. The story, by the morning of February, was over. The toast had been, on the morning of January 14th, the most important thing that had happened to our marriage that week. I will admit, with the wry self-knowledge that long marriages eventually require, that the laugh in our kitchen on most Tuesday mornings is the laugh of two people who long ago stopped pretending either of them was funnier than the other. We laughed about it. We are still laughing about it. The joke, as my husband says with the deadpan grin he learned in a Newton kitchen in 1989, is the marriage. Chapter 17. Emily, 3 mornings in May. I want to give you 3 mornings. The first morning is Thursday, April 30th, 2026, the Hollywood Walk of Fame ceremony. Stanley Tucci and I are receiving stars together, a joint ceremony. In the specific, the Walk of Fame sometimes does these things for related honorees, because Stanley is, in addition to being my brother-in-law, my longtime collaborator across The Devil Wears Prada and Citadel, and the small number of films we have, by accident of casting, both been in. We have flown in from London. The cameras are all there. The crowd is the crowd. The speeches are the speeches that the Walk of Fame, in the quiet way of all the Hollywood industry rituals, requires. John is in the audience, He has flown in from a job. He is, in the manner of the particular scheduling of his own work, in the specific 6-day window before he goes back to set on his next film. He is wearing, in the quiet way only my husband, in this year of 2026, wears at such things, the suit I have asked him to wear. He is in the front row. Hazel and Violet are at home in Brooklyn with their grandmother, Mary Claire, who has come up from Newton, and are, by the private math, in school. I want to tell you the ordinary words I said in the speech. I will give you them, because they have, in the days since, been on the public record in a way I do not need to obscure. I said of Stanley Tucci that we spend far too much time together already. I said of Stanley that now we're going to spend even more time together as people trample over us. But that's fine. I said, and these are also the exact words, that I love him so much and that I am so honored to be there with him. And then I said the quiet sentence about John. I called him my beautiful husband. I said that he had just made life heaven. I had not, when I had written the speech the night before, planned the small sentence about him. The sentence about him had arrived, in the ordinary habit of any such sentences, in the particular moments of speeches, on the stage itself. I looked at him in the front row, wearing the suit, the small suit that I had, the night before, said to him the Navy, in the particular shorthand of 15 years of marriage that meant the Navy, the one. And I said the sentence about him. I said it because I had, in the private way the previous 4 months, had asked me to say it, been waiting to say it. The previous 4 months had been the 4 months after the rumors. The previous 4 months had been the 4 months in which, in the kitchen of the Standish, the specific toast of the January morning had been the private answer to the ordinary story. The answer had been the quiet "we are still here." The answer had been the small "the gate is still the gate." The answer had been, in the sort of way only a 16-year-old marriage can answer such things, the particular "yes, we are still doing this. Look at us. We are still doing this." The answer had been, until the Walk of Fame morning, the small private answer. It had been the answer of the kitchen. On the morning of April 30th, 2026, I had decided, without telling anyone I had decided it, to make the answer public. The particular sentence about John in the speech was the public answer. The specific sentence was, and I will say this with the private care of a 43-year-old wife, not for the press cycle. I was not, on a morning of April 30th, 2026, refuting the press cycle. I had decided with John in the kitchen that the press cycle did not deserve a refutation. I was, the morning of April 30th, for John. I was, one morning of April 30th, saying the true thing about the man at the front row. I was, early on the morning of April 30th, not letting the ordinary kitchen answer of the 4 previous months be the only answer we offered. The kitchen answer is the answer in private. The Walk of Fame sentence was the answer in public. Let me tell you, with the quiet honesty an English woman in her early 40s owes herself, that the small sentence, "He has just made life heaven," is not, according to the prose this book has been writing in, a good sentence. The sentence is, in the conventions of the prose this book has been writing in, a sentence a woman says in a speech. The sentence has in it the particular imprecision of every public speech. The sentence does not, by the standards of books by Barron prose, earn the word heaven. The sentence does not, by the measure of the small "isn't that lovely" of Mary Claire and Joanna Mackey, say what it means. The sentence is, however, what I said. The sentences, in the manner of any such sentences, in all such public speeches, at all such moments, in all such marriages, near enough. It is near enough. John, in the front row, knew what it meant. He cried. I have, in the particular way of all mornings, seen him cry many times. I have seen him cry in the chair next to the hospital bed in Los Angeles in 2014. I have seen him cry in the chapel of Villa Oleandra in 2010. I have seen him cry in the particular kitchen of the brownstone in Park Slope in 2017, the night the script of A Quiet Place sold. I have seen him cry in the specific private habit of every such crying. On the private many other mornings, let me not book, narrate. He cried on the Walk of Fame morning, in the front row, in the public. He cried in the public on purpose. The second morning is Sunday, May 3rd, this year of 2026. The second morning is the morning of the Lucille Lortel Awards, the ordinary off-Broadway theater awards held at NYU Skirball in Lower Manhattan. John is being recognized for the quiet producing work he has done on a small off-Broadway play. I am with him. I am, in the particular way of a wife who has, for 15 years, watched her husband produce particular things on stages in Lower Manhattan, proud of him. The afternoon is sunny. The carpet is the small off-Broadway carpet, which is shorter and less photographed than the carpet of the Walk of Fame morning had been 4 days earlier. We are, on the off-Broadway carpet, the particular also couple, not the focus, but visible, available for the press to confirm that we are both, by accident of scheduling, and by deliberate specific consistency of the 4 previous months, together. We walk the carpet. We stand for the photographs. We do not, on the off-Broadway carpet, perform. The private photographs from the Lucille Lortel afternoon are the photographs that, in the simple of every such photographs, would be folded by anyone tracking the ordinary January 2026 story into the quiet running answer of the family. The small running answer of the family, by May 3rd, 2026, had become the running answer of We Are at the Same Things. We are at the Walk of Fame on April 30th. We are at the Lucille Lortel on May 3rd. We are, in 3 days' time, at the Met Gala. At least I am, and John was supposed to be. The third morning is Tuesday, May 5th, this year, of 2026. The third morning is the morning of the Met Gala in Manhattan. I attend in the particular custom-made dress by a small designer I had been working with for 4 months. John does not attend. He had been supposed to. He had been, 2 weeks earlier, in the particular final RSVP confirmation, yes. He had, in the quiet way of all working actors' schedules, been moved on the call sheet of his next film by 6 days. The 6 days had landed him on the Tuesday of the Met Gala, 6 days out from the start of principal photography on his next film. The specific decision had been made, in the ordinary way working actors' families make such decisions, that he would not, on the night of the Met Gala, fly back from his rehearsal location to Manhattan for the night. I went alone. I posed alone. The press cycle, which by May 5th, 2026, had largely stopped writing the private January story, but had not, in the private convention of any such cycles, entirely forgotten it, wrote, on May 6th and May 7th, the ordinary speculation pieces about whether John's absence at the Met Gala was a quiet signal. The pieces were not the front page pieces the January pieces had been. The pieces were the small second week pieces of a story that had, by then, more or less ended. I read one of the pieces. I read it because, in the way of a famous person on the morning after the Met Gala, you do, despite knowing better, read 1. The piece argued, in the way the press cycle of celebrity weddings argues, that John's absence was a thing. I have in this book mostly not addressed the particular argument of the press cycle directly. I will, on the small subject of John's absence from the Met Gala on the night of May 5th, 2026, address it directly here, for the last time. John was not at the Met Gala on the night of May 5th, this year, of 2026 because he had a job. He had a job that he had committed to several months earlier. He had a job that paid the particular things that paid for the specific kitchen of the private apartment at the ordinary Standish. He had a job that, in the quiet schedule of the small film he was about to start shooting, required him to be in the morning of May 11th, 2026, at the particular set of the small film 50 miles south of Boston, in the particular way the Krasinski-Newton geography of his career has, by now, become the particular geography of his career. He was on the night of May 5th, 2026, 6 days from the start of principal photography. He had a job. He was working. The press cycle had decided that, in the precise way the press cycle does, the man not at the Met Gala was a story. The story was a small story. The story was a story that ran for about 4 days. The story is, by the time you are reading this book, in the specific search archive of the internet, but is no longer, by the running metric of the press, the story. What I will leave you with, at the end of this chapter, is the private image of John on the morning when May 6th, this year, of 2026. He is in a hotel room in the ordinary town 50 miles south of Boston, where the quiet film he is about to shoot is based. He has called me. The call is on FaceTime, in the careful Our Family Runs FaceTime, on a small stand on the particular kitchen counter of the small apartment at the Standish. I am, in the quiet way of any such mornings, at the counter. Hazel and Violet are in school. Mary Claire has gone back to Newton. The apartment is quiet. John, on the particular FaceTime screen of the specific stand on the private kitchen counter, is in the ordinary hotel room. He is wearing the quiet brown sweatshirt he has been wearing on every small FaceTime call from every particular hotel room in every small film he has shot in the last 15 years. He is, in the ordinary way, of a husband who has been a husband for 16 years, near. He says, in the private habit of any such mornings, they wrote the thing. I say, and her words are exact, yes, they did. He says, do you want me to fly back? I say, no. He says, good. He says, I love you. I say, I love you. Make the movie. He says, I will. He hangs up. The particular kitchen, the morning May 6th, 2026, is the kitchen. The marriage, on the morning of May 6th, 2026, is the marriage. The press cycle, by the morning of May 7th, this year of 2026, has moved on. The toast, which, on a morning of January 14th, 2026, had been the most important thing the marriage had done that week, has, the morning of May 6th, 2026, become the specific whole answer the marriage has been, the entire time, building toward. The whole answer is, and here is the sentence I would, given the chance to revise the Walk of Fame speech, have put in the speech instead. He is, on every Tuesday morning, in the room. He is in the room. The room is, by now, the room of 16 years of mornings. The room is the marriage. I will admit, with the wry self-knowledge that long marriages eventually require, that the laugh in our kitchen on most Tuesday mornings is the laugh of two people who long ago stopped pretending either of them was funnier than the other. We laughed about it. We are still laughing about it. The joke, as my husband says with the deadpan grin he learned in a Newton kitchen in 1989, is the marriage. Chapter 18. John, 2 Standish Mornings. I laughed when I sat down to write this chapter. The laugh was, in the small habit of all the laughs in our kitchen, a deadpan one. The laugh of a man who has, after 17 years of marriage, finally stopped pretending he knows what is funny and started simply trusting his wife's verdict on the matter. I want to give you 2 ordinary mornings. The first morning is a Tuesday. The book you are reading was finished, on the writer's end, on a Wednesday in May of this year, of 2026. And I am giving you the Tuesday before the writer's last day, because the Tuesday is the morning I want a stranger to leave this book with. It is 6:45. The light in the kitchen of the apartment at the Standish is the soft, slanted Brooklyn light that, in May, comes through the window in long bars and lays itself across the floor. I am at the counter. I am, in the long married way one is at one's own counter on a Tuesday morning, mostly looking at the coffee. The coffee is on the second cycle. The first cycle had been Emily's, and she had taken her cup with her into the back of the apartment to get the girls into the small choreography of school. I can hear her, somewhere down the hall, in the sort of tone an English mother uses when she is asking a 9-year-old for the 3rd time to find her shoe. Hazel comes into the kitchen. She is 12. She is wearing the school sweater. The sweater has, in the year she has been wearing it, accumulated the small history of all things a 12-year-old wears every day. There is a thread coming loose at the cuff. There is, on the private spot below the collar where the inside meets the outside, a smear of something that, given the long career of stains on Hazel's school sweaters, is probably yogurt. She says without preamble, the way only the firstborn ever says anything, "What's for breakfast?" I tell her. She accepts the answer the way a 12-year-old accepts a parent's answer in the kitchen, without comment, with a small grudging acknowledgement that the parent has, in fact, answered the question, and with the immediate move on to the next subject, which is, in her case this morning, a teacher whose name I have heard, but whose face I have not yet, in the small chronology of being the father of a 12-year-old, fully placed. She tells me about the teacher. I listen. I listen the way Mary Claire would have listened. I do not, in the manner that all the husbands who have tried this fully reach the listening Mary Claire did. I reach, on most Tuesdays, a useful percentage of it. Emily comes into the kitchen with Violet on her hip. Violet, at 9, is technically too old to be on her mother's hip. Violet, on most Tuesday mornings, gets the morning version of the hip anyway. The hip is the small, unfair perk of the younger child. Hazel, who is over it, does not, this morning, complain. Emily looks at me over the top of our daughter's head. She does the eyebrow lift that, in 17 years, has been the single most consistent feature of our marriage. The eyebrow lift means, today, coffee. I pour her coffee. I hand it to her over the kitchen island. She takes it. She drinks. Violet, on her hip, points at the toaster. Violet, at 9, has discovered a small private theory of breakfast, which is that toast, when made by her father, is the only correct breakfast for a Tuesday in May. The theory has, in our family, been honored. I make her toast. I make Hazel toast. I make Emily toast. I make myself toast. The toaster, which is the toaster the apartment came with, and which has, in 5 years, never given any of us a particular reason to complain, makes the 4 pieces of toast in the order it has always made the 4 pieces of toast. We stand at the counter and we eat the toast. The conversation is the conversation of every kitchen on every Tuesday morning of every long marriage in every neighborhood, in every part of the world. The conversation is about whether the dog needs walking. There is no dog. The conversation is about whether the laundry is in the dryer or in the basket. It is in the basket, and the basket is in the small unspecified spot it always is, by the window. The conversation is about whether Hazel has remembered her permission slip. She has, and she is, by 12, used to being asked. The conversation is about whether Violet is, today, taking her violin. She is not, because today is Tuesday, and the violin lives at the school on Tuesdays in a way the family has, by year 3 of Violet's violin career, mostly stopped questioning. The conversation is the conversation of being 4 people in the same room. The conversation is the quartet. The quartet, on the Tuesday morning of May 12th, 2026, is in the kitchen. I want to share, in the closing of this book, what I learned during the week of the January story. I learned that the kitchen is the answer. I do not mean this metaphorically. I mean, in the most literal way, that the kitchen, one morning of January 14th, 2026, when the press cycle was at its highest pitch, was the room in which my wife asked me, in one word, whether I wanted toast, and I answered in 2 words that yes, I did, and in which the toast was made and eaten, and the day proceeded. I mean that the kitchen, early on the morning of April 30th, this year of 2026, was the room from which I left for the Walk of Fame ceremony, at which my wife would, in her speech, say the thing about heaven. I mean that the kitchen, in the morning of May 6th, 2026, was the room in which my wife held the FaceTime stand, and the 4 of us, the husband 6 days from the start of principal photography on his next film, the wife on the morning after the Met Gala she had attended alone, the older daughter who had already left for school, the younger daughter who had not yet left for school, were, in the running tally of the family, in the same room. The kitchen is the answer, because the kitchen is the room in which the family is, on a Tuesday, in May, at 6:45 in the morning. 4. The second morning I want to give you is the morning after. Epilogue. The second morning is a Wednesday. It is, by the small accident of the writer's deadline, the morning I am completing this manuscript. I am in the kitchen with the same coffee, with the same light, with the same toaster, with, somewhere down the hall, the same wife, and the same 2 daughters doing the same choreography. The only difference between this morning and yesterday morning is that today is the day this book is finished. Let me tell you, on the morning this book is finished, the one true thing I have learned in 17 years of being Emily Blunt's husband. The thing I have learned is that the woman I married is the woman who, on the morning before my speech is going to be the speech, asks if I want toast. The thing I have learned is that the long marriage is not, in any of the press tour versions of it, a romance. The long marriage is, in the actual experience of being inside it, a toast. The toast is, on the worst Tuesday mornings, the most important thing the marriage does. The toast is, on the best Tuesday mornings, also the most important thing the marriage does. The toast is the small ordinary food that the husband and the wife share at the counter every morning of a 16-year run, in the kitchen, with the light through the window, with the 2 daughters somewhere down the hall, with the work and the press cycles and the cameras and the books being written about them. All of it, outside. The toast is the inside. I do not, in this book, have any other answer for you about how a marriage lasts. The toast is the answer. There is no mountain. There was a kitchen in August of 2009 when the ring caught light. There was a kitchen in October of 2012 when my wife said she wanted to have a baby. There was a kitchen in February of 2014 when Hazel was 3 hours old. There was a kitchen in June of 2016 when Violet was 2 weeks old. There was a kitchen in late 2016 when the script of A Quiet Place sold itself in 3 hours of reading. There was a kitchen in January of 2026 when my wife asked me about toast. There is, on this Wednesday morning in May of this year of 2026, a kitchen. Emily comes into the kitchen with the same eyebrow lift. She pours her own coffee this morning. She has finished mine on her way through. She says, and his words are exact, because they are the words I have in 17 years heard her say more often than any other word she has ever said to me. Toast? I say. Yes, please. She makes the toast. I eat the toast. The kitchen, on the Wednesday morning of May 13th, 2026, is working. The kitchen is the marriage. The marriage is the kitchen. This is the whole answer. This is the answer the book has been pointing at for 17 chapters and a prologue, with the slow patience of a father who has been crossing the room toward his wife every morning since November of that autumn of 2008. I crossed it again this morning. I will cross it tomorrow morning. I will, if the kitchen lets me, cross it for the rest of my life. This has been a Books by Barron love story. Thank you for spending the time. Love is hard. Love is worth it. Love stays. Author's note: this book is creative nonfiction inspired by publicly available material. Interior monologue and reimagined dialogue have been dramatized from documented texture, and verbatim quotes are reproduced with attribution to their original sources on the public record. This book is creative nonfiction based on publicly available material. Interior monologue and reimagined dialogue have been dramatized from documented texture. Verbatim quotes are reproduced with attribution to their original sources on the public record. By Barron Darby. I want to leave the reader of this book with the small framing note I have given myself in writing every book in this series. The Books by Barron Love Stories series is built on a single conviction that the love stories of real couples, told with care, are among the most useful pieces of cultural information a listener can spend 2 hours with. The conviction is not new. Every long marriage produces, by the small accumulation of its daily decisions, a small body of wisdom that the next generation of marriages will benefit from. The conviction is, in the publishing economy of the early 21st century, mostly absent. There are not enough books about long marriages. There are too many books about beginnings. The beginning of a love is the part that the bookstores prefer, because the beginning is the part that converts most efficiently into the sale. The middle of a love, and the late middle, and the long, quiet years of the middle, and the small private revisions of the middle, is the part that the bookstores have by historical accident mostly skipped. This series is the ordinary attempt to put the middle back on the shelf. The book you have just finished is about a couple I have written about, for the same reason I have written about every couple in this series. Because the couple is, in the small, ordinary public record of their lives together, a couple whose middle has been doing the work the middle is supposed to do. Emily Blunt and John Krasinski are, in the most ordinary possible sense, staying. They have stayed, on the public record, since November of late 2008. They have stayed through 2 children. They have stayed through the renovation of 2 homes. They have stayed through the small, private, and very loud public press cycle of January 2026. They are, as of the morning this book closes, still staying. I do not, in this book, claim that any of the dialogue in the chapters is a transcript. I have been clear, in the front matter and throughout, that the interior monologue and reimagined dialogue have been built from documented texture and presented as such. The verbatim quotes are sourced and attributed in the accompanying research notes file, with the quiet care a reference work owes its readers. If you have come to this book having never heard of either of them, my hope for you is that you have come away with the small, ordinary feeling that long marriages exist, that long marriages are made in kitchens, and that the kitchen of a long marriage is the most important room in the house you have not yet built. If you have come to this book as a fan, my hope for you is that the version of Emily Blunt and John Krasinski you have spent 2 hours with is the version of them that the public record actually supports. The version that is, beneath all the press cycles, a couple in love at a counter, making toast. The toast is the whole answer. The toast is, if you would like one small instruction from this book on your own Tuesday morning, the particular thing you might consider making in your own kitchen for whoever is, this morning, the person you are crossing the room toward, make them the toast. Barron Darby. Books by Barron. Love Stories series, this year of 2026. I will admit, with the wry self-knowledge that long marriages eventually require, that the laugh in our kitchen on most Tuesday mornings is the laugh of 2 people who long ago stopped pretending either of them was funnier than the other. We laughed about it. We are still laughing about it. The joke, as my husband says, with the deadpan grin he learned in a Newton kitchen in 1989, is the marriage.